The Romans thought gladiator games were brutal, until they witnessed this. There's a festival so horrifying that historians refuse to describe it in academic papers, yet millions participated willingly for over 800 years. The craziest part, 3 countries still celebrate a watered-down version today, and you've probably heard of it. Festivals today come with safety barriers, medical tents, and security guards everywhere you look. But thousands of years ago, people celebrated with rituals that would make modern insurance companies faint on the spot. Ancient cultures didn't mess around when it came to their religious ceremonies and seasonal celebrations. Take the Aztecs, for example. Their festivals honoring the sun god Huitzilopochtli involved actual human sacrifice. Warriors would capture enemies specifically for these events, dragging them up massive stone pyramids while crowds cheered below. The victim's heart would be cut out, still beating, and held up to the sky. Blood would pour down the temple steps as thousands watched. Makes sense, right? Nothing says good harvest quite like a fresh corpse. The Celts had their own brutal traditions during Samhain, the ancient predecessor to Halloween. They'd build enormous bonfires, and sometimes throw people into them as offerings to their gods. Druids would select victims from prisoners or volunteers, who believed dying this way guaranteed them a spot in the afterlife. The screams could be heard for miles, but hey, at least the spirits were happy. Then there's the crowd problem. Ancient festivals drew massive numbers of people, but nobody had figured out crowd control yet. When tens of thousands gathered in confined spaces like amphitheaters or temple courtyards, disaster struck regularly. People got trampled to death trying to get closer to the action or escape when panic spread. The Roman Circus Maximus could hold 250,000 spectators, and deadly stampedes happened so often that cleaning crews just factored body removal into their regular duties. Disease spread like wildfire at these packed events too. Ancient people didn't understand germs, so they'd gather for days without proper sanitation, sharing food and water from questionable sources. Cholera, dysentery, and plague could wipe out entire communities after a single festival. What started as a celebration of life often turned into a celebration of death, literally. But the weird part is how long these festivals lasted. We complain about 3-day music festivals today, but ancient celebrations could go on for weeks. The Roman Saturnalia festival ran for 7 days straight. People would drink, dance and party until they literally collapsed from exhaustion. Some never woke up. Dehydration, alcohol poisoning, and sheer physical exhaustion claimed victims every year. Greek festivals weren't much safer. During the Dionysiac mysteries, worshippers would consume massive amounts of wine mixed with unknown herbs and mushrooms. They'd dance themselves into frenzied states, sometimes for days without stopping. Women would tear apart live animals with their bare hands while hallucinating. Men would beat themselves bloody with whips and chains. Many participants died from the drugs, the violence, or both. Let's not forget the construction hazards. Ancient festival organizers built temporary structures that would never pass a modern safety inspection. Wooden bleachers collapsed regularly, crushing spectators underneath. Temporary bridges over rivers or ravines would snap under the weight of crowds. Stone altars cracked and toppled over, pinning priests and worshippers alike. Weather played a deadly role too. Ancient people held festivals regardless of conditions, and they paid the price. Lightning strikes killed dozens at outdoor ceremonies. Flash floods swept away entire gatherings. Extreme heat during summer festivals caused mass fainting and dehydration deaths. But the show had to go on. The gods demanded it. Some cultures took ritual danger to insane levels. The ancient Germanic tribes practiced bog sacrifice during their spring festivals. They'd drown people in swamps as offerings to fertility gods, weighing down the bodies with branches and stones. Archaeologists still find these preserved corpses today, complete with the ropes used to strangle them. The Phoenicians had a charming tradition called Molech worship, where they'd heat up bronze statues until they glowed red hot, then place newborn babies on the outstretched arms. The infants would roll down into a fire pit below while drums beat loudly to drown out the screaming. Parents believed this sacrifice would bring prosperity to their families. Talk about putting all your eggs in one basket. And the weird part is that people kept coming back for more. Year after year, communities would gather for these deadly celebrations, fully knowing the risks. Death was just part of the experience, an offering to the gods, a test of faith, or simply bad luck. Ancient festivals created a template that would influence dangerous celebrations for thousands of years to come. The combination of massive crowds, religious fervor, alcohol, and zero safety regulations proved to be a deadly recipe that humans somehow couldn't resist. Of course, not every ancient culture went quite this far with their brutal rituals, but some took organized violence to an entirely different level. turning death itself into the main event that crowds would travel hundreds of miles to witness. Ancient bloodshed was just the beginning. The Roman Empire turned festival violence into an art form that made earlier sacrificial rituals look like gentle playground games. Their gladiator spectacles weren't just entertainment, they were death machines disguised as celebration. Picture massive stone amphitheaters packed with 50,000 screaming Romans. The Colosseum alone could hold more people than most modern stadiums. These weren't casual weekend events either. Gladiator festivals stretched for days, sometimes weeks, with fresh blood spilling onto sand-covered arena floors from dawn until dusk. The Romans had perfected something truly terrifying, making mass violence feel like a party. But here's where it gets really wild. The gladiators weren't always criminals or slaves. Many were volunteers who signed up knowing they might die for crowd approval. Professional fighters who trained for years, built muscle, learned combat techniques, then stepped into arenas where death was literally the main attraction. The audience didn't just watch, they decided who lived and died with simple thumb gestures. The fights themselves were brutal beyond modern imagination. Gladiators used nets, tridents, swords and shields in combinations designed for maximum spectacle. Blood loss was expected. Broken bones were normal. Some fighters specialized in specific weapons like the retiarius who fought with fishing nets and three-pronged spears. Others wore heavy armor and swung massive swords. When these different fighting styles clashed, the results were predictably messy. Then there's the animal component that made everything exponentially more dangerous. Romans imported lions, tigers, bears, elephants, and even hippos from across their empire just to watch them tear people apart. Professional beast hunters called venatos fought these creatures as warm-up acts before the main gladiator events. Imagine facing a hungry lion with nothing but a spear while thousands of people cheer for the cat. The logistics alone were insane. Wolves. Rome's government spent fortunes shipping exotic predators hundreds of miles, then keeping them angry and hungry in underground chambers beneath the arena floors. Elaborate pulley systems lifted caged animals directly into the fighting pit through trapdoors. Sometimes they released dozens of wild beasts simultaneously, turning the arena into pure chaos. What made these festivals especially deadly was their duration and intensity. Multi-day events meant exhausted fighters facing fresh opponents. Dehydration became a serious problem under the Mediterranean sun. Infections from untreated wounds killed fighters days after they'd survived their actual battles. Medical care was primitive, basically limited to cauterizing bleeding wounds with hot metal. The crowds themselves created additional hazards. 50,000 excited Romans packed into stone seating created stampede risks whenever panic struck. Food poisoning from festival vendors was common. Pickpockets and thieves worked the crowds while everyone focused on arena violence. Drunken spectators sometimes fell from upper seating levels, adding random casualties to the planned violence below. Some emperors pushed these festivals to absolutely ridiculous extremes. Trajan once held games lasting 123 consecutive days with over 10,000 gladiators participating. Emperor Commodus actually fought as a gladiator himself, though his opponents were typically given dull weapons while he used sharp ones. Not exactly fair competition. The Romans also flooded arenas for naval battle recreations called naumachia. They'd fill the Colosseum with water, bring in actual warships, then watch real naval combat with genuine drowning risks. Participants died from drowning, ship collisions and traditional combat weapons. It was like combining three different ways to die into one spectacular event. Female gladiators, called gladiatrices, added another layer of danger and spectacle. These women fought each other and sometimes wild animals, proving that Roman gender equality extended to giving everyone equal opportunities to die violently for public entertainment. Their fights were considered especially exotic and drew huge crowds. Economic pressure made everything worse. Gladiator schools were businesses that invested heavily in training fighters, then needed return profits from successful arena performances. This created incentives to push gladiators into increasingly dangerous situations. School owners wanted spectacular fights that would earn invitations to prestigious festivals, even if it meant higher casualty rates. The psychological toll was enormous too. Survivors often suffered what we'd now recognize as severe PTSD. Many gladiators developed drinking problems or committed suicide rather than continue fighting. The few who earned freedom after years of combat often struggled to adapt to normal civilian life. What's really striking is how normal this all seemed to Romans. They genuinely believed watching people fight to the death was standard family entertainment. Parents brought children to gladiator festivals the way modern families go to baseball games. But ancient Romans weren't the only ones who mixed celebration with extreme danger. Medieval Europeans would take festival hazards in completely different directions, turning fire itself into the centerpiece of their most dangerous celebrations. Fire made everything more exciting in medieval times. It also made everything more deadly. Medieval festivals loved their flames. Bonfires towered higher than houses, torches lit up the night sky, and sparks danced through crowds like deadly fireflies. What could possibly go wrong? Well, pretty much everything. Medieval fire festivals weren't just about roasting marshmallows around a cozy campfire. These were massive community events where entire towns gathered to celebrate religious holidays, harvest seasons, or local traditions. The bigger the fire, the better the party. Towns competed to build the most spectacular bonfires, stacking wood as high as church towers and wide enough to roast an entire ox. The problem: nobody had invented fire departments yet. When things went sideways, they went sideways fast. A single gust of wind could turn a celebration into a catastrophe. Sparks would leap from bonfires like tiny arrows, landing on thatched roofs and wooden buildings. Within minutes, entire neighborhoods could be engulfed in flames. The very thing people came to celebrate became the thing that destroyed their homes. Take the Midsummer Eve celebrations across medieval Europe. Towns would build massive bonfires in their central squares, surrounded by wooden houses with straw roofs. Makes sense, right? Residents would dance around these towering infernos, often while wearing loose flowing clothes that could catch fire in seconds. Children would run between the flames as part of traditional games. Adults would leap over smaller fires for good luck, assuming they didn't trip and become the main course. But the real danger wasn't just the planned fires. Medieval festivals featured early versions of fireworks that were about as predictable as a drunk night on horseback. These primitive explosives were basically gunpowder stuffed into whatever containers people could find. Clay pots, animal bladders, hollowed out vegetables. Creativity knew no bounds, and neither did the potential for disaster. The explosions were random and powerful. A firecracker might fizzle out harmlessly, or it might explode with enough force to take someone's hand off. There were no safety regulations, no warning labels, and definitely no adult supervision. Kids as young as 10 would handle these explosive devices like toys, because technically, that's exactly what they were. Then there's the issue of crowd control around open flames. Medieval festivals drew massive crowds into narrow streets and small squares. When panic broke out, say, when someone's hair caught fire, or an explosion went off unexpectedly, people had nowhere to run. The same fires that created the festive atmosphere became deadly obstacles blocking escape routes. Medieval chroniclers recorded festival fires that consumed entire sections of towns. The 1212 London Bridge fire started during a celebration and destroyed hundreds of homes. Similar disasters struck festivals across Europe, but people kept lighting the fires anyway. The show must go on, even if the show occasionally burned down the theatre. Weather made everything worse. Dry summers turned festivals into tinderboxes waiting for a spark. Strong winds could spread flames faster than people could run. Rain, oddly enough, created its own problems. Wet wood produced more smoke, which blinded festival goers and made breathing difficult. Slippery conditions around fires meant more people fell into the flames. The weird part is how festivals adapted to these dangers without actually eliminating them. Towns started positioning buckets of water around celebration areas, but these were often knocked over in the excitement or used up quickly when fires spread. Some communities designated official fire watchers, but these volunteers were usually as drunk as everyone else by the time the real festivities began. Religious authorities tried to ban the most dangerous practices, but medieval people took their fire festivals seriously. These weren't just parties, they were deeply rooted traditions connected to agricultural cycles, religious beliefs, and community identity. Telling medieval townsfolk to tone down their fire festivals was like telling them to stop breathing. Injuries from medieval fire festivals ranged from minor burns to catastrophic disfigurement. Medical treatment was primitive, so even small burns could become infected and deadly. Smoke inhalation killed people who never got close to the actual flames. The combination of alcohol, fire, and medieval medicine created a perfect storm of preventable tragedy. Yet these festivals continued for centuries, evolving and adapting, but never really becoming safe. Each generation learned hard lessons from the previous one's disasters, then promptly ignored those lessons in favor of bigger, more spectacular fires. Human nature hasn't changed much. We still love our dangerous fun, even when we know better. The legacy of medieval fire festivals lives on in modern celebrations, though thankfully, with better safety measures. But before we get too comfortable with our modern precautions, let's remember that dangerous festival traditions didn't disappear, they just found new ways to threaten public safety. Speaking of chaos and complete abandonment of rules, medieval Europe had a tradition that would make modern party planners break into a cold sweat. The Feast of Fools turned entire towns upside down for days at a time. Churches became stages for mock ceremonies, streets filled with people wearing masks, crowns and whatever ridiculous outfits they could find. But here's the kicker, all laws were temporarily suspended. You read that right. For several days each year, mostly around Christmas and New Year, communities basically hit the pause button on civilization. Peasants could mock nobles without consequences. Servants ordered their masters around. The lowest-ranking church officials took over from bishops and priests, conducting silly fake services that would normally get them excommunicated. What started as harmless role reversal quickly spiraled into absolute chaos. Drunkenness wasn't just common, it was practically mandatory. People stumbled through streets, completely wasted on whatever alcohol they could get their hands on. Medieval ale was strong stuff, and when you're drinking for days straight without any legal consequences, things get ugly fast. Physical fights broke out constantly, without any law enforcement. Disputes that normally would result in fines or jail time turned into full-blown brawls. Men settled scores with their fists, women joined in too, wielding whatever weapons they could grab. Kitchen knives, farming tools, even church candlesticks became instruments of violence. The temporary suspension of justice meant everyone knew they could get away with almost anything. Thieves had a field day during these festivals. Professional criminals waited all year for the Feast of Fools. They moved through crowds like sharks, picking pockets and stealing anything valuable they could carry. Homes were broken into while owners were out celebrating. Livestock disappeared from farms. Merchant stalls were ransacked. The chaos provided perfect cover for every type of crime imaginable. Churches, ironically, became centers of the wildest behavior. Mock bishops led fake services, where sacred hymns were replaced with drinking songs. Altars were turned into dining tables. Some accounts describe people bringing animals into churches as part of the festivities. Donkeys were crowned as temporary bishops. The line between celebration and sacrilege disappeared completely. The violence wasn't random, it was often personal. People used the lawless period to settle grudges that had been building all year. Neighbors who'd been feuding over property lines suddenly found themselves in bloody confrontations. Business disputes turned deadly when there were no courts to appeal to. Family conflicts exploded into violence that sometimes lasted generations. Then there's the problem of mob mentality. Large groups of drunk, mask-wearing people tend to make terrible decisions together. What started as harmless pranks escalated into serious destruction. Houses were vandalized or burned down, public buildings were damaged, bridges and roads suffered from deliberate sabotage by people who thought it was funny. Public order collapsed so completely that some towns looked like war zones by the end of the festival. Bodies littered the streets from fights that went too far. Property damage reached astronomical levels. Families were torn apart by violence or theft. The economic impact lasted months as communities struggled to rebuild and recover. Women faced particular dangers during these festivals. The suspension of laws meant sexual assault cases couldn't be prosecuted. Harassment and worse became common, as men realized they could act without consequences. Many women simply barricaded themselves in their homes during the worst days of the celebration. The weird part is that authorities actively encouraged this madness. They believed letting people blow off steam for a few days each year prevented larger rebellions. Better to have controlled chaos than uncontrolled revolution. Church leaders thought mock ceremonies actually strengthened real faith by showing how ridiculous alternatives looked. Some towns tried to set boundaries, but they rarely worked. Declaring certain areas off-limits, or trying to maintain some basic rules proved impossible when the entire concept was lawlessness. Guards and officials either joined the festivities or were overwhelmed by sheer numbers. The aftermath was always brutal. When laws were reinstated, communities faced massive cleanup efforts. Bodies had to be buried, damaged buildings needed repair, stolen property was rarely recovered. Families mourned loved ones who died in completely preventable violence. The social fabric of entire towns was shredded and had to be slowly rebuilt. Medical care was primitive, so injuries from fights often turned fatal. Broken bones, knife wounds and head trauma from brawls killed people days or weeks after the festival ended. There were no emergency rooms, no antibiotics, no proper surgical techniques. What seemed like minor injuries during the chaos proved deadly later. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect was how normal it all seemed to medieval people. They accepted that temporary lawlessness was just part of life. The cycle repeated year after year, with the same predictable results of death, destruction, and social upheaval. While medieval Europeans were perfecting the art of organized social chaos, other cultures were developing their own unique approaches to dangerous celebration. Some involved less alcohol but significantly more risk to life and limb. After centuries of medieval chaos and lawless festivals, you'd think humans would learn to avoid deliberately dangerous celebrations. Well, think again. Enter one of the world's most famous death-defying traditions that happens every single July in Spain. Picture this: 6 massive bulls, each weighing over 1,200 pounds, charging full speed through narrow cobblestone streets. Now add hundreds of people running for their lives just inches ahead of those razor-sharp horns. Welcome to Pamplona's running of the bulls, where vacation plans and hospital visits often go hand in hand. The madness starts at exactly 8 a.m. when a rocket fires into the air. That's the signal. The bulls are released from their holding pens, and chaos erupts immediately. Runners dressed in white clothes with red scarves sprint through the winding streets, desperately trying to stay ahead of animals that can reach speeds of 35 miles per hour. Makes sense, right? Humans running at maybe 15 miles per hour against bulls built like living freight trains. But here's the truly wild part. The entire course is only half a mile long, yet it takes place on some of the most treacherous terrain imaginable. These aren't modern wide boulevards we're talking about. The streets of Pamplona's old town are slippery from morning dew, uneven from centuries of wear, and barely wide enough for the bulls themselves. Runners slip and fall constantly. When someone goes down, others trip over them, creating human pile-ups that would make highway accidents look organized. The statistics are absolutely brutal. Since 1911, 15 people have died during the running. Hundreds more suffer serious injuries every single year. Goring wounds are the most feared. Those horn punctures can pierce vital organs in seconds. Then there are the trampling injuries when runners fall and get stepped on by both bulls and other people. Broken ribs, concussions and shattered bones happen so regularly that local hospitals prepare for weeks in advance. And the weird part is, most participants aren't even Spanish locals. Thousands of tourists fly in from around the world specifically to risk their lives in this 800-year-old tradition. American college students, European backpackers, and thrill-seekers from every continent pack into Pamplona each July. Many show up hungover from the previous night's partying, which definitely improves their decision-making abilities. Let's not forget the bulls themselves aren't exactly having fun either. These animals are confused, terrified, and extremely aggressive. They're bred specifically for bullfighting, meaning they're already temperamental. When they're suddenly released into screaming crowds and narrow streets, their natural instinct is to charge at anything that moves. Runners who think they can predict which way a panicked bull will turn usually learn otherwise the hard way. Then there's the spectator danger that most people don't consider. Thousands line the streets to watch, many leaning over balconies or pressing against barriers. Bulls have been known to leap over barriers or crash through wooden fences. In 1995, a bull actually broke through a barrier and injured several spectators who thought they were safely out of harm's way. The most terrifying moments happen at Dead Man's Corner, a sharp turn about halfway through the route. Bulls often lose their footing on the slippery stones here, sliding into walls or crashing into groups of runners. The narrow passage creates bottlenecks where people get trapped with nowhere to escape when the bulls catch up. What makes this even more dangerous is that 6 bulls aren't released alone. 6 steers run with them, supposedly to keep the bulls calm and moving in the right direction. But when you've got 12 large animals thundering through medieval streets, followed by hundreds of panicked humans, the calming effect is pretty questionable. Medical teams position themselves along the entire route with ambulances ready to rush the injured to hospitals. Emergency doctors work around the clock during festival week, treating everything from minor cuts to life-threatening internal injuries. Some years the emergency rooms look like war zones. Despite all the danger, or maybe because of it, the running of the bulls has become a global phenomenon. Ernest Hemingway wrote about it, making it famous worldwide. Social media has only increased its appeal, with people desperate to get that perfect selfie while bulls charge behind them. Because nothing says great vacation photo like potential death in the background. The festival continues for 9 days, with a new bull run each morning. By the end, local hospitals have treated dozens of serious injuries, and everyone starts planning for next year's event. The bulls that survive the running later face matadors in the bull ring, adding another layer to this celebration of controlled chaos. But Spain's dangerous festival traditions don't stop with angry bulls charging through streets. There's another Spanish celebration that involves grown men literally jumping over rows of helpless babies. After watching bulls charge through narrow streets, you might think Spain has cornered the market on festival danger. Well, think again. England has its own brand of absolutely ridiculous risk-taking, and it involves a wheel of cheese hurtling down a hill at highway speeds. Cooper's Hill in Gloucestershire looks innocent enough. Rolling green countryside, sheep dotting the landscape, the kind of place you'd expect to see in a postcard. But once a year this sleepy hillside transforms into something that would make insurance companies weep. The slope drops at a terrifying 50-degree angle. That's steep enough to send you tumbling head over heels just walking down it normally. Here's where things get wonderfully insane. Someone rolls an 8-pound wheel of double Gloucester cheese down this death trap of a hill, then dozens of people chase after it. The goal? Catch the cheese and win it. Simple, right? Wrong. The cheese reaches speeds of up to 70 miles per hour within seconds. Meanwhile, human beings, who can run maybe 15 miles per hour on flat ground, are supposed to somehow catch this dairy missile while navigating a slope that would challenge a mountain goat. What actually happens is pure chaos. Runners immediately lose their footing and begin what officials politely call controlled falling. In reality, it's more like human bowling balls careening down the hillside. Or bodies flip, twist and crash into each other in ways that would make stunt coordinators cringe. The lucky ones slide on their backs or stomachs. The unlucky ones tumble headfirst into the ground repeatedly. Broken bones are practically guaranteed. Every single year, ambulances line up at the bottom of Cooper's Hill like they're waiting for Black Friday shoppers. Dislocated shoulders, fractured ribs, twisted ankles, the medical tent sees it all. One year a participant broke his neck. Another time someone dislocated their jaw so badly they couldn't speak for weeks. But here's the weird part. Spectators get hurt almost as often as the racers themselves. The hillside becomes so crowded that people standing on the slope lose their footing too. They tumble into the path of the competitors, creating human pile-ups that would be comical if they weren't so dangerous. Emergency responders have to navigate through hundreds of onlookers just to reach the injured. The cheese itself becomes a weapon. At 70 miles per hour, an 8-pound wheel of dairy can do serious damage. It's bounced off spectators' heads, knocked people unconscious, and once famously launched itself into a nearby field where it demolished a picnic setup. The impact left a crater in the ground that took weeks to heal. No official safety measures exist. None. There are no helmets required, no protective gear, no age restrictions. Children as young as 10 have participated alongside adults in their 60s. The only safety feature is a bunch of rugby players positioned partway down the hill to catch people who are completely out of control. They're called catchers, but they're more like human crash pads. Weather makes everything worse. Rain turns the grass into a slip and slide of mud and hidden rocks. Dry conditions create rock-hard ground that punishes every fall. Snow has never stopped the event. It just adds another layer of danger as participants struggle to maintain any semblance of balance on the icy slope. The winners rarely actually catch the cheese. Most of the time, whoever reaches the bottom first mused, usually after tumbling the entire way down, gets declared the victor. They're handed their prize wheel while nursing various injuries and trying to remember what day it is. Many winners can't even stand up properly to accept their cheese. Local authorities have tried to ban the event multiple times. They've cited safety concerns, liability issues, and the strain on emergency services. But the cheese rolling has been happening for over 200 years, and the locals aren't giving up easily. When officials try to cancel it, underground versions pop up. People show up anyway, roll cheese down the hill, and chase after it regardless of what the law says. The most absurd part, the cheese isn't even that good. It's standard double Gloucester, the kind you can buy at any grocery store for a few pounds. Participants are literally risking life and limb for dairy products they could purchase safely at the local market. Yet hundreds of people travel from around the world just for the chance to tumble down Cooper's Hill in pursuit of processed milk. Emergency rooms in the area have learned to prepare special supplies every cheese rolling weekend. Extra splints, additional X-ray technicians, and trauma specialists all get called in. The local hospital basically treats it like a natural disaster. What drives people to chase dairy products down a near vertical slope? Perhaps it's the same impulse that makes others face charging bulls. But while Spanish runners have streets to navigate, these English daredevils have gravity as their main opponent. And gravity, unlike bulls, never gets tired. Speaking of people settling scores in dangerous ways, there's a festival in Peru where the fighting isn't accidental, it's the whole point. High in the Peruvian Andes, there's a festival where neighbors literally beat the hell out of each other. And here's the weird part, everyone's totally cool with it. Welcome to Takanaku, where settling scores means throwing punches, not lawyers. Every December 25th in the small town of Santo Tomas, something extraordinary happens. Families gather not for peaceful Christmas dinner, but to watch their relatives duke it out in bare-knuckle brawls. The name Takanaku comes from Quechua, meaning when the blood is boiling. Trust me, that translation isn't metaphorical. This isn't some underground fight club, we're talking about an official community event, where your sweet grandmother might challenge the lady who's been spreading gossip about her potato garden. Men fight men, women fight women, and teenagers get their shot too. The whole community shows up wearing colorful masks and traditional costumes, turning violence into theater. But here's where things get genuinely dangerous. These aren't staged WWE matches with safety protocols. People throw real punches with real consequences. Broken noses happen regularly. Fractured ribs are common. Some fighters leave with missing teeth, and that's considered a normal Tuesday in Santo Tomas. The festival operates on a simple rule: if you've got beef with someone, Christmas Day is your chance to settle it. That co-worker who stole your idea, your neighbor whose chickens keep destroying your crops, the guy who's been flirting with your wife. Mask up and meet them in the ring. Literally, what makes this particularly hazardous is the alcohol factor. Local chicha flows freely throughout the event, and drunk people throwing punches rarely make the best decisions. Fighters who might normally pull back a bit lose their restraint after a few drinks. The crowd gets more bloodthirsty. The hits get harder, medical emergencies spike. Then there's the altitude issue that most people forget about. Santo Tomas sits over 12,000 feet above sea level. That thin mountain air makes everything harder: breathing, thinking, recovering from getting punched in the face. Fighters get winded faster and make poor decisions. Blood oxygen levels drop. What might be a manageable scuffle at sea level becomes genuinely dangerous when your brain isn't getting enough air. The referee situation adds another layer of risk. While there are officials, they're community members, not trained professionals. They might let fights go on too long, or miss serious injuries. There's no standardized medical team standing by. If someone gets seriously hurt, help might be hours away down winding mountain roads. Women's fights can be particularly brutal because there are fewer weight classes and age restrictions. A 20-year-old might face off against someone twice her age over a land dispute that's been brewing for months. The older fighter has experience and grudge-fueled motivation. The younger one has energy and something to prove. Neither has professional training or protective gear. Teenagers participate in their own division, which sounds cute until you realize these are kids settling real feuds with their fists. School bullying issues get resolved through violence. Family honor gets defended with broken bones. Some of these young fighters are barely old enough to drive, but old enough to give each other concussions. The really crazy part: everyone genuinely believes this makes their community healthier. The theory is that getting all the anger out in one controlled setting prevents year-round violence and grudges. Maybe it works. Santo Tomas does have relatively low crime rates the rest of the year, but the Christmas Day casualty count tells a different story. Medical facilities in the area aren't equipped for the influx of fight-related injuries. The local clinic might see more broken bones in one day than they typically handle in months. Serious head injuries require transport to larger cities, assuming anyone realizes how severe they are in time. Despite the obvious dangers, participation is voluntary. Nobody forces anyone into the ring, but social pressure runs deep in tight-knit mountain communities. Backing down from a challenge can affect your reputation for years. Some people fight not because they want to, but because they feel they have to maintain respect. The festival ends with an almost magical transformation. After hours of brutal fighting, everyone gathers for a communal meal. Winners and losers shake hands, hug, and often become closer friends than they were before throwing punches. All grudges are officially settled until next year. The community emerges bruised but supposedly united. But what happens when holiday traditions literally require people to physically assault each other? What occurs when an entire community watches neighbors deliberately harm one another and calls it celebration? And speaking of communities gathering to watch dangerous spectacles, There's an island in Greece where they've figured out how to make explosions part of their Easter tradition. Every Easter night on the Greek island of Chios, two rival parishes engage in what might be the most beautiful and dangerous fireworks battle in the world. The tradition, called Rouka to Polemos, literally meaning rocket war, turns the quiet town of Runtados into a battlefield where thousands of homemade rockets scream through the darkness. Picture this madness. Teams from Agios Markos and Panagia Erythiani churches spend months crafting explosive rockets from scratch. We're not talking about store-bought sparklers here. These are serious projectiles packed with gunpowder, designed to fly hundreds of meters through the air. The goal: hit the opposing church's bell tower as many times as possible before dawn breaks. The night of the battle, windows get boarded up like a hurricane's coming. Locals know what's about to happen. Metal sheets cover storefronts. Cars disappear from the streets. Even the bravest residents peek through tiny gaps in their shutters, because stepping outside during this chaos would be pure insanity. When the clock strikes the designated hour, all hell breaks loose. Rockets launch from rooftops, balconies, and makeshift platforms. The sky lights up like a war zone. Thousands of projectiles whistle overhead, exploding against stone walls and showering sparks everywhere. The sound is deafening, a constant barrage of pops, bangs, and sizzling fuses that echoes through the narrow streets. But here's where things get really wild. Despite all the precautions, people still get hurt. Burns are common when rockets explode too close to spectators. Flying debris cuts faces and hands. Some rockets go rogue, smashing through supposedly secure windows or setting small fires. Emergency crews stay busy treating injuries throughout the night, though locals tend to shrug off minor burns as part of the experience. The origin story makes this tradition even more fascinating. Legend says it started during Ottoman rule, when Turkish authorities banned the churches from ringing their bells during Easter celebrations. Clever Greeks supposedly began this rocket war as a distraction, allowing secret bell ringing while the Turks focused on the fireworks spectacle. Whether that's true or not, the tradition stuck around long after the Ottomans left. What makes Rouka to Polemos particularly dangerous is the amateur nature of the explosives. These aren't professional pyrotechnicians following safety protocols. They're passionate locals mixing gunpowder in their backyards, crafting rockets with whatever materials they can find. Quality control? Non-existent. Some rockets explode immediately after lighting. Others fly in completely unexpected directions, turning spectators into unwilling targets. The rivalry between the two churches adds another layer of intensity. Both sides claim victory each year, though nobody keeps an official count of successful hits. Arguments break out. Tempers flare. Sometimes the competition gets so heated that fights erupt between supporters, adding fistfights to the list of evening hazards. Modern authorities have tried implementing safety measures, but tradition wins out every time. Officials issue warnings about staying indoors. They station ambulances nearby. Fire trucks patrol the area, ready to douse any blazes that might start. Yet the rocket war continues unchanged. Generation after generation. The strangest part? Nobody wants it to stop. Locals wear their battle scars proudly. Children grow up dreaming of joining their family's rocket-making team. Even tourists flock to witness this controlled chaos. Despite the obvious risks, hotels advertise rocket war packages for visitors brave enough to experience the madness firsthand. The preparation process reveals just how seriously participants take this tradition. Teams guard their rocket-making secrets jealously. Special gunpowder mixtures get passed down through families like precious heirlooms. The best rocket builders earn legendary status in their neighborhoods. Months before Easter, you can hear the sound of hammering and drilling as teams construct launching platforms and test their creations. Weather adds another unpredictable element to the danger. Strong winds can send rockets careening into crowds. Rain makes surfaces slippery, increasing the risk of falls while people scramble for cover. Fog reduces visibility, making it impossible to track incoming projectiles until they're practically on top of you. The aftermath looks like a war zone. Streets are littered with rocket remains and spent explosives. Scorch marks decorate building walls like abstract art. Broken glass sparkles in doorways. Cleanup crews work for days clearing debris, occasionally discovering unexploded rockets hidden in corners and rooftops. Yet, for all its dangers, Rouka to Polemos represents something uniquely human: the willingness to risk safety for tradition, community, and pure spectacle. The rocket war continues because it connects modern Greeks to their ancestors, binding neighbors together through shared risk and celebration. But this Greek tradition isn't the only festival where participants literally leap into danger for the sake of ancient customs. In Spain, another centuries-old ritual puts innocent lives at stake in ways that might seem even more shocking. Picture this: grown men dressed as literal devils, complete with horns and bright yellow costumes, taking running leaps over rows of newborn babies. Welcome to El Colacho, Spain's most nerve-wracking festival that makes bungee jumping look like a peaceful hobby. Every year in the village of Castrillo de Murcia, locals gather for what might be the world's most anxiety-inducing tradition. The festival happens during Corpus Christi, usually in late May or early June. Parents actually volunteer their babies for this event. They lay their precious little ones on mattresses lined up in the streets, then watch as the Colacho, men dressed as devils, sprint toward them and leap. The logic behind this madness: the jump supposedly cleanses the babies of original sin and protects them from evil spirits. It's like a spiritual insurance policy, except the premium involves watching strangers hurdle over your infant at high speed. Makes you wonder what the rejection rate is for devil volunteers, right? This tradition dates back to 1620, making it over 400 years old. That means thousands of Spanish babies have been part of this ritual throughout history. The festival emerged from Catholic traditions mixed with older pagan customs, creating something uniquely Spanish and uniquely terrifying for any parent watching. But here's where things get serious. The obvious danger is catastrophic. One mistimed jump, one stumble, one moment of lost concentration, and the consequences would be unthinkable. The Colacho runners aren't professional athletes. They're local men, often middle-aged, who volunteer for the role. They might be farmers, shopkeepers, or mechanics during the rest of the year. Athletic prowess isn't exactly a job requirement. The physical demands are intense too. The devils don't just jump once and call it a day. They leap over multiple rows of babies, sometimes dozens of infants spread across several mattresses. Each jump requires perfect timing and coordination. Fatigue builds up, legs get tired, concentration wavers. Any runner knows that form deteriorates as exhaustion sets in. Weather adds another layer of risk. Spanish summers can be brutally hot, and running in full costume makes things worse. Dehydration affects judgment and physical performance. Sweat can blur vision or make footing uncertain. Rain would make everything slippery and dangerous, though the festival typically happens during drier months. Then there's the crowd factor. Hundreds of spectators pack the narrow streets of this small village, creating a charged atmosphere. The energy is electric, but crowds can be unpredictable. Someone might step into the path accidentally. A photographer could get too close for the perfect shot. Children in the audience might dart forward at the wrong moment. The babies themselves present variables too. Newborns are unpredictable. They move, cry, and sometimes parents need to comfort them during the ceremony. What happens if a baby starts crying and the parent instinctively reaches out just as a devil approaches? Split-second decisions could turn celebration into tragedy. Yet somehow this festival continues without major incidents. The locals treat it with deep reverence and careful preparation. The devils practice their jumps, routes are planned meticulously. Spectators know where to stand and where not to interfere. It's organized chaos, with centuries of tradition backing up the safety measures. The participating families aren't thrill-seekers or devils, they're devout Catholics who genuinely believe this ritual protects their children. Grandparents who experienced El Colacho as babies bring their own grandchildren to participate. It's a cycle of faith that overrides fear. But let's be honest about the anxiety levels. Even if you believe completely in the spiritual protection, watching someone jump over your newborn has to spike your blood pressure. Parents grip each other's hands. Cameras capture expressions of nervous faith mixed with pure terror. The relief when each baby's turn ends is visible from space. Modern safety concerns have crept in over recent decades. Insurance companies probably have nightmares about this event. Liability lawyers would have field days. Tourist footage spreads across social media, bringing global attention and inevitable criticism about child safety. The Spanish government has never banned El Colacho, recognizing its cultural significance, but they do monitor it closely. Medical personnel stay nearby during the festivities. The event receives official oversight to ensure it follows safety protocols as much as possible for something so inherently risky. International visitors flock to witness this spectacle, bringing cameras and wide-eyed amazement. Many can't believe what they're seeing. The The cultural gap is enormous. What seems like reckless endangerment to outsiders represents sacred tradition to locals. The festival also includes other traditional elements like religious processions and community celebrations. But let's face it, nobody travels to rural Spain to watch a procession. They come for the devil jumping, the heart-stopping moment when faith meets physics in the most literal way possible. Speaking of heart-stopping festivals, Spain certainly doesn't hold a monopoly on dangerous traditions. Italy has its own version of organized chaos that involves millions of pounds of citrus fruit turned into weapons. Remember that baby jumping festival where grown men leap over infants? Well, if you thought that was intense, wait until you hear about what happens when an entire Italian town decides to wage war with fruit. Welcome to the Battle of Oranges, where citrus becomes ammunition and everyone's fair game. Every February the medieval town of Ivrea transforms into a battlefield. Not with swords or cannons, but with over 1 million pounds of oranges hurling through the air at bone-crushing speeds. This isn't some gentle food fight either. We're talking about organized chaos, where getting knocked unconscious is just part of the fun. The madness stems from a legendary rebellion against a tyrannical lord back in medieval times. According to local law, a brave woman named Violetta refused the lord's advances and sparked an uprising that freed the town. Fast forward to today, and they reenact this victory by pelting each other with oranges for 3 straight days. Makes perfect sense, right? Here's where things get dangerous. Teams of foot soldiers armed with oranges face off against horse-drawn carts filled with defenders wearing medieval costumes and protective gear. The foot soldiers, they get nothing but oranges and pure adrenaline. No helmets, no padding, just their bare hands and whatever clothing they wore that morning. The physics alone should terrify anyone with basic math skills. An orange weighs about 6 ounces and can be thrown at speeds exceeding 60 miles per hour. When one smacks you in the face, it delivers roughly the same impact as getting punched by an angry teenager. Now multiply that by thousands of oranges flying simultaneously through narrow medieval streets. Emergency rooms see a predictable spike during festival season. Black eyes are practically guaranteed. Broken noses happen so frequently that locals barely blink. Head injuries from direct hits knock people unconscious regularly. Then there's the aftermath. Nobody talks about as the citric acid from burst oranges mixing with open wounds creates a burning sensation that lasts for days. But wait, there's more chaos brewing in the crowd dynamics. Spectators pack onto balconies, rooftops, and sidewalks to watch the carnage unfold below. Problem is, oranges don't follow flight paths. Stray projectiles regularly slam into bystanders who thought they were safely positioned. Smart spectators wear motorcycle helmets. The overconfident ones end up with matching bruises. The streets become a slippery nightmare of pulverized orange pulp, creating conditions similar to an ice rink, covered in citrus slush. People slip, fall, and get trampled by charging teams. Broken bones from falls are almost as common as injuries from direct hits. The narrow medieval streets, designed for horses and pedestrians centuries ago, weren't exactly built for modern-day fruit warfare. Weather adds another layer of unpredictability. Rain turns the orange pulp into a slick paste that's impossible to navigate safely. Cold temperatures make the oranges harder, increasing their impact force. Sunny days create blinding glare off all that citric acid coating every surface. Mother Nature doesn't pause the battle though. Neither the oranges keep flying regardless. Medical teams work overtime during the festival, treating everything from minor cuts to serious concussions. Participants sign waivers acknowledging the risks, but that legal paperwork doesn't prevent the inevitable injuries. Ambulances stay on standby because someone always needs emergency treatment when you're essentially having a food fight with medieval intensity. The weird part is how seriously everyone takes this fruit-based combat. Teams train year-round, developing throwing techniques and defensive strategies. Veterans share battle stories about legendary hits and narrow escapes. There's genuine pride in participating, even knowing you'll probably go home bruised and battered. Local businesses embrace the madness differently. Shop owners board up windows like they're preparing for a hurricane. Hotels stock extra ice packs and first aid supplies. Restaurants serve orange-themed meals while their windows remain safely shuttered against flying citrus. Tourism thrives on this controlled chaos. Thousands of visitors flock to Ivrea specifically to witness or participate in the orange warfare. Many leave with stories, bruises, and a newfound respect for the dangerous potential of seemingly innocent fruit. Travel insurance companies have learned to ask specific questions about Italian festival plans. The cleanup afterward reveals the true scale of destruction. Streets are ankle-deep in orange pulp, buildings are stained with citrus juice that takes months to fully wash away. The smell lingers for weeks, creating an oddly pleasant aftermath to such violent festivities. Cleanup crews work around the clock removing the fruity debris. Environmental concerns rarely dampen the enthusiasm. All those oranges come from specific groves that grow fruit deemed unfit for eating, too sour, too small, or too damaged for commercial sale. So technically this festival gives rejected oranges one final moment of glory before becoming compost. This tradition of turning fruit into weapons might seem uniquely Italian, but it represents something deeper about human nature and celebration. Sometimes the most meaningful traditions involve accepting a little pain for the sake of community and history. Speaking of painful traditions that test human limits, there's a Japanese festival that makes orange warfare look like child's play. Deep in the mountains of Nagano Prefecture, Japan, something remarkable happens once every 6 years that makes Spain's running of the bulls look like a gentle jog through the park. The Onbashira festival, literally meaning honorable pillars, transforms ordinary Japanese men into daredevils willing to ride massive tree trunks down steep mountainsides at breakneck speeds. And yes, people get seriously hurt doing this. Here's what makes this festival absolutely wild. Giant fir trees, some weighing several tons and measuring up to 55 feet long, are cut down from sacred forests and prepared for their dangerous journey. But these aren't just any logs being moved from point A to point B. These are future shrine pillars that must travel in the most death-defying way possible, with human riders clinging to their sides as they hurtle down rocky slopes. The tradition stretches back over 1,200 years, making it one of Japan's oldest and most dangerous festivals. Every 6 years, when the time comes to replace the pillars at Sowa Grand Shrine, thousands of participants gather to take part in what locals call the most dangerous festival in Japan. That's quite a claim in a country known for its intense traditions. But why would anyone volunteer to ride a multi-ton log down a mountain? Well, being selected as a rider brings incredible honor to your family and community. The riders, called Kyotoko, or tree men, are chosen through a combination of physical ability, courage, and community standing. Once selected, they become local celebrities, assuming they survive the ride intact. The festival unfolds in 2 main phases, each with its own unique dangers. First comes Yamadashi, where the logs are brought down from the mountains. This is where the famous, or infamous, log riding happens. Riders straddle the massive timber as it slides, bounces, and crashes down slopes that would challenge experienced skiers. The logs can reach speeds of up to 30 miles per hour, which might not sound extreme until you remember there are no brakes, no safety harnesses, and no way to steer. Then there's the chaos factor nobody talks about. These logs don't follow predictable paths. They hit rocks, launch into the air, and sometimes flip completely over. Riders must have lightning-fast reflexes to avoid being crushed beneath tons of rolling wood. Some jump off mid-ride when things get too dangerous, but timing that leap wrong can be just as deadly as staying on. The second phase, Satobiki, involves dragging the logs through the town and raising them at the shrine. This might sound safer than the mountain ride, but thousands of rope-pulling participants create their own hazards. People get trampled, ropes snap with devastating force, and the massive logs can shift unexpectedly while being maneuvered into position. Medical crews stand ready throughout the festival, and they're kept busy. Broken bones are common, concussions happen regularly, and more serious injuries occur with disturbing frequency. In 1992, 2 men died during the festival when they were crushed by logs. Multiple fatalities have been recorded over the decades, yet people continue volunteering to participate. What makes this even more intense is the religious significance driving the danger. The festival honors the Shinto gods, and participants believe their sacrifice and risk-taking brings blessings to the entire community. The logs themselves become sacred objects once they reach the shrine, making every broken bone and scar part of a spiritual offering. The festival draws massive crowds of spectators who come to witness this spectacular display of courage and tradition. International visitors often express shock at the apparent lack of safety measures. There are no helmets required, no safety nets, and no modern equipment to reduce the obvious risks. The festival organizers maintain that adding safety measures would diminish the spiritual and cultural value of the tradition. Local hospitals prepare months in advance for Onbashira, stocking extra supplies and bringing in additional staff. Emergency crews position themselves along the route, but accessing injured riders on steep mountain terrain often proves challenging. Sometimes the most seriously hurt participants must be airlifted to medical facilities. The weird part is how normal this all seems to the locals. Children grow up watching the festival and dreaming of their chance to ride the logs. Families pass down stories of ancestors who participated, creating a culture where extreme risk becomes a badge of honor rather than something to avoid. Between festival years, the community spends time preparing both physically and spiritually for the next event. Training doesn't really exist for something this unpredictable, but participants work to stay in peak physical condition and develop the mental toughness required to face down a runaway log. While Japan's Onbashira proves that ancient traditions can pack serious danger, it's hardly the only festival where massive crowds gather for religious purposes. Sometimes the sheer number of people creates hazards that dwarf even the risk of riding logs down mountains. The sheer scale is impossible to grasp until you see the numbers. Every 12 years the Kumbh Mela draws between 70 and 120 million people to India's sacred rivers. That's more than the entire population of most countries gathering in one place for a single religious festival. The logistics alone should terrify anyone who's ever been stuck in a crowded subway station. These aren't casual tourists showing up for Instagram photos. Hindu pilgrims travel thousands of miles believing that bathing in the holy waters during specific astrological alignments will wash away their sins and break the cycle of death and rebirth. For many it's a once-in-a-lifetime spiritual journey. For others it becomes exactly that, but not for the reasons they hoped. The 1954 Kumbh Mela at Allahabad started like any other massive gathering. Millions of devotees camped along the river banks, waiting for the most auspicious moment to take their holy dip. But on February 3rd, something went catastrophically wrong. A barrier collapsed near the main bathing area, and panic spread faster than wildfire through dry grass. What happened next defies comprehension. Over 800 people were crushed to death in a matter of minutes. Bodies piled up like discarded clothing, as desperate pilgrims tried to escape the surging crowd. The very people who had come seeking salvation found themselves trapped in a human avalanche with nowhere to run. The weird part is how these tragedies keep repeating, despite everyone knowing the risks. In 2013, another stampede at the Allahabad railway station killed 36 people during the Kumbh Mela. Just 2 years later, 27 more died in a similar crush. You'd think after centuries of these festivals, someone would figure out crowd control. Well, they've certainly tried. Modern Kumbh Mela organizers deploy thousands of police officers, install temporary bridges, and use satellite imagery to monitor crowd density. They've divided the bathing areas into sections and stagger entry times to prevent everyone from rushing in at once. Loudspeakers constantly remind pilgrims to move slowly and stay calm. Yet the fundamental problem remains unchanged. Too many people, not enough space, and religious fervor that makes rational thinking nearly impossible. Then there are the living conditions that would make a refugee camp look luxurious. Millions of pilgrims camp in temporary settlements that spring up overnight along the riverbanks. Sanitation facilities are overwhelmed within hours. Clean drinking water becomes scarce. Food vendors operate without proper refrigeration in the scorching heat. Disease spreads through these makeshift cities faster than gossip in a small town. During the 2001 Kumbh Mela, dozens of people died from cholera and other waterborne illnesses. The irony cuts deep, coming to purify their souls in holy water that might kill them with contamination. Medical teams work around the clock, but treating millions of people with limited resources is like trying to empty an ocean with a teaspoon. Let's not forget the physical dangers of the bathing ritual itself. The riverbanks become slippery, muddy slopes when millions of wet feet trample the same ground. Elderly pilgrims lose their footing and disappear beneath the crowds. Children get separated from families and are trampled by adults who can't see them in the chaos. Strong swimmers drown because they can't fight against the current of human bodies pushing them deeper into the water. The 2019 Kumbh Mela organizers tried using artificial intelligence to predict crowd movements and prevent dangerous bottlenecks. Drones monitored the massive gathering from above, while mobile apps guided pilgrims to less crowded areas. These high-tech solutions helped reduce casualties, but they couldn't eliminate the fundamental mathematics of the problem. When you pack that many humans into a limited space, physics takes over. Some pilgrims arrive weeks early and refuse to leave until the festival ends, creating permanent overcrowding. Others show up with serious medical conditions, believing the holy waters will cure ailments that actually require immediate hospital treatment. Festival organizers have started requiring health certificates for elderly participants, but enforcement remains spotty when you're dealing with millions of determined believers. The most haunting aspect isn't the scale of past tragedies, it's knowing they'll happen again. Every few years another stampede makes international headlines. Families lose loved ones who traveled thousands of miles seeking spiritual fulfillment. Survivors carry physical and emotional scars for the rest of their lives. Yet millions continue flocking to these gatherings because faith often overrides fear. What makes crowd disasters even more terrifying is how they can strike at any large gathering, religious or otherwise. The same deadly dynamics that plague the Kumbh Mela have turned music festivals and sporting events into killing fields when things go wrong. Blood streaming down faces, metal rods piercing through cheeks, tongues skewered with silver spikes. Welcome to Thaipusam, where devotion meets extreme body modification in Malaysia's most intense religious festival. Every January or February, thousands of Hindu devotees gather at temples across Malaysia for what might be the world's most painful celebration. They're not there to light candles or say prayers, they're there to turn their bodies into human pincushions. The preparation starts weeks before the festival. Devotees fast, meditate and purify themselves mentally and physically. But here's where things get wild. They're not preparing for a peaceful ceremony. They're getting ready to pierce every imaginable part of their body with sharp metal objects. The main event? The kavadi. Picture a massive decorated frame made of peacock feathers, flowers and bells. Now imagine carrying this 60-pound structure on your shoulders for miles. Still doesn't sound too crazy? Well, the kavadi is attached to your body through dozens of hooks piercing your skin and back muscles. Then there's the face piercing. Devotees line up to have their cheeks, tongues and lips pierced with metal rods called vel. These aren't tiny needles either. Some are as thick as pencils and stretch from one cheek straight through to the other. The really committed ones get multiple piercings, creating a metal maze across their face. You'd think people would be screaming in agony, right? Here's the weird part. Most claim they feel nothing. Devotees enter a trance-like state through prayer and meditation, believing their faith numbs the pain completely. They walk around chatting, smiling, even laughing with metal rods sticking out of their faces. But medical experts aren't buying the no pain claims entirely. The human body doesn't just switch off pain receptors because you're religious. What's likely happening is a combination of adrenaline, endorphins, and intense psychological focus that helps manage the pain. Your brain can be pretty amazing at blocking signals when it's focused on something else. The dangers are real though. Blood loss is the obvious concern. When you puncture multiple parts of your body, bleeding is inevitable. Some devotees faint from blood loss or the shock of piercing. Others develop infections when the wounds aren't properly cleaned afterward. Let's not forget the hygiene issues. While modern Thaipusam celebrations use sterilized equipment, things weren't always so careful. In the past, the same piercing tools were used on multiple people without proper cleaning. Hepatitis and other blood-borne diseases spread easily under those conditions. The walking part adds another layer of risk. Devotees carrying kavadi must walk several miles from one temple to another, while pierced and bleeding. The weight of the decorative frames combined with blood loss and the Malaysian heat creates a perfect storm for collapse. Medical teams now station themselves along the route specifically to catch people who faint or stumble. And the weird part is, accidents during the piercing process can be catastrophic. If a rod slips or is inserted wrong, it can puncture major blood vessels or damage nerves. Facial piercings gone wrong can cause permanent numbness or paralysis. One wrong move and a devotee's act of faith becomes a medical emergency. Children participate too, which raises the stakes even higher. While kids usually don't get the extreme piercings, they often carry smaller kavadi or have their foreheads pierced with single hooks. Their smaller bodies can't handle blood loss the same way adults can. The festival creates an interesting medical challenge for local hospitals. Emergency rooms prepare for Thaipusam like they would for a natural disaster. They stock extra blood for transfusions, bring in additional staff, and set up treatment stations near temple sites. It's the only religious festival that requires its own trauma response plan. Malaysian authorities have implemented safety measures over the years. Piercing equipment must be sterilized, medical teams must be present, and there are limits on how many piercings one person can receive. But enforcement is tricky. How do you regulate religious practices without offending believers? The most dangerous part might be peer pressure within the religious community. Some devotees feel compelled to undergo more extreme piercings to prove their devotion. It becomes a twisted competition where bleeding more somehow equals loving God more. Modern Thaipusam has evolved to be safer than historical versions, but risks remain. Infection rates have dropped thanks to sterilized equipment, but accidents still happen. The combination of religious fervor, sharp objects and large crowds will never be completely safe. What drives people to such extremes? For devotees, the physical pain represents spiritual purification. They believe their suffering pleases the Hindu deity Murugan and brings blessings to their families. The more you suffer, the greater the blessing. But Malaysia isn't the only place where religious festivals push the human body to dangerous limits. Across the world, other celebrations blend faith with physical risk in ways that would make Thaipusam devotees seem tame. November 5th rolls around every year in England, and suddenly the entire country becomes obsessed with fire. Guy Fawkes Night transforms quiet neighborhoods into explosive war zones where families gather around towering bonfires, clutching sparklers like medieval torches. What started as a celebration of preventing Parliament from being blown to bits has ironically become one of the most dangerous nights of the year. The tradition dates back to 1605, when Guy Fawkes tried to detonate gunpowder barrels beneath the Houses of Parliament. He failed spectacularly, got caught, and ended up being tortured before his execution. But here's the twisted part. Instead of quietly remembering this failed terrorist plot, the English decided the best way to celebrate would be recreating explosions everywhere. Makes perfect sense, right? Every November, families start building bonfires weeks in advance. These aren't your cozy campfire setups. We're talking about massive wooden pyramids that reach 20 feet high, stuffed with old furniture, broken pallets, and anything else that burns well. The bigger, the better seems to be the motto. Then there's the guy, a stuffed dummy representing Fawkes that gets tossed on top like some medieval sacrifice. But here's where things get seriously dangerous. These bonfires grow so enormous that they generate enough heat to melt car bumpers parked 50 feet away. Houses with wooden siding or thatched roofs suddenly find themselves in real trouble when the wind shifts direction. Emergency services report dozens of structure fires every Guy Fawkes night, many starting from bonfires that got completely out of control. The fireworks make everything infinitely worse. Since the 1600s, people have been setting off homemade explosives to commemorate the night Parliament didn't explode. Professional displays are spectacular, but the real danger comes from backyard enthusiasts who think bigger always means better. Every year, hundreds of people end up in hospital emergency rooms with severe burns from fireworks that misfired, exploded in their hands, or simply went off in unexpected directions. Children get the worst of it. Sparklers might seem harmless, but they burn at temperatures over 2000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt copper. Kids wave them around like magic wands, completely unaware they're holding miniature welding torches. Burns to faces, hands and clothing happen constantly throughout the night. Then there are the rocket incidents. Homemade rockets frequently tip over or launch sideways instead of straight up. They've crashed through windows, set gardens on fire, and occasionally hit people directly. Some amateur pyrotechnicians get creative with their explosive devices, adding extra gunpowder, or combining multiple fireworks together. The results are spectacularly dangerous. Weather makes everything more unpredictable. November in England means rain, wind, and unpredictable conditions. Wet wood creates more smoke than flame, leading people to add accelerants like gasoline or kerosene to get their fires started properly. That's when things go from dangerous to absolutely catastrophic. Flash fires have engulfed entire bonfires in seconds, catching nearby spectators completely off guard. The crowd dynamics create additional hazards. Hundreds of people gather around these massive fires, often in muddy fields or uneven terrain. When explosions go wrong or fires spread unexpectedly, panic sets in quickly. People stumble over each other trying to escape, especially when visibility drops due to thick smoke. Emergency vehicles struggle to reach accident scenes through crowds and narrow country lanes. Illegal fireworks flood the market every November. Professional-grade explosives somehow find their way into amateur hands, despite strict regulations. These industrial-strength fireworks pack enough explosive power to blow off fingers or blind someone permanently. The black market thrives during Guy Fawkes season, with dealers selling everything from military flares to commercial-grade rockets. Even organized events aren't always safe. Community bonfires sometimes collapse unexpectedly, sending burning debris flying in all directions. Safety barriers fail when crowds push forward for better views. Professional firework displays occasionally malfunction, sending explosives into spectator areas instead of skyward. The tradition has adapted somewhat to modern safety concerns. Many communities now organize official displays instead of encouraging individual bonfires, but the DIY spirit remains strong, especially in rural areas where regulations are harder to enforce. Families still build backyard pyres and set off their own explosives, maintaining centuries of dangerous celebration. Fire services work overtime every November 5th, responding to dozens of emergency calls throughout the night. Ambulances patrol popular celebration areas, expecting the inevitable burn victims and explosion injuries. Hospital emergency rooms stock extra supplies specifically for Guy Fawkes casualties. The irony remains deliciously twisted, celebrating the failure of an explosion by creating thousands of smaller explosions across the entire country. Guy Fawkes wanted to destroy Parliament with gunpowder, but modern England destroys property, injures citizens, and creates chaos every year in his memory instead. Yet this explosive commemoration pales in comparison to Spain's approach to animal blessing ceremonies, where the danger comes not from fireworks, but from convinced horses forced to leap through flames for spiritual purification. Medieval fire festivals were child's play compared to what happens in the Spanish village of San Bartolomé de Pinares every January 16th. The Blessing of the Animals festival takes everything dangerous about fire and adds terrified horses into the mix. Brilliant planning, really. Picture this: dozens of riders charge their horses directly through massive bonfires burning in the village streets, not around them, through them. The flames shoot up several feet high while smoke billows everywhere, creating a scene that looks more like a medieval battle than a religious ceremony. The tradition stretches back centuries, rooted in the belief that passing animals through fire will cleanse them of evil spirits and protect them from disease throughout the coming year. But here's where it gets interesting. The horses have no idea they're being spiritually cleansed, they just know there's fire ahead, and their human is asking them to run straight into it. Most horses have a natural fear of fire, its basic survival instinct. Yet these riders expect their animals to trust them completely and leap through flames that could easily burn them both. The preparation alone reveals how risky this whole affair really is. Horses are decorated with colorful ribbons and bells, turning them into walking party favors before they become potential casualties. Riders spend weeks training their animals, slowly introducing them to smaller fires and smoke to reduce panic. Even with all this preparation, accidents happen regularly. When things go wrong, they go spectacularly wrong. Horses rear up, throwing riders onto hard stone streets. Others bolt sideways into crowds of spectators who gather to watch the madness unfold. The combination of fire, frightened animals and packed streets creates multiple hazards at once. Burns are common for both riders and horses, especially when animals hesitate mid-jump or stumble while landing. Then there's the smoke factor that organizers somehow overlooked for centuries. Thick clouds of burning wood smoke fill the narrow village streets, reducing visibility to practically nothing. Horses already stressed by flames now can't see where they're going. Riders can barely breathe, let alone guide their animals safely. Spectators cough and choke while trying to capture the perfect photo of this insanity. The most dangerous part happens when multiple horses attempt to jump simultaneously. Traffic jams at bonfires aren't exactly covered in riding school. Horses crash into each other mid-air or land on top of one another. The lucky ones just get tangled in decorative ribbons. The unlucky ones end up with broken legs or worse. Local emergency services have become experts at treating burn injuries and trampling wounds every January. They set up medical stations around the village, knowing full well they'll be busy before the night ends. Veterinarians also stand by, because injured horses need immediate attention too. The fact that medical teams are considered essential equipment for this festival should tell you something about its safety record. Weather makes everything exponentially more dangerous. Rain turns cobblestone streets into skating rinks for horses wearing metal shoes. Wind whips flames in unpredictable directions, sometimes singeing spectators who thought they were standing at a safe distance. Snow and ice make landings after fire jumps treacherous for both horse and rider. The weird part is how seriously everyone takes the spiritual aspect while completely ignoring the obvious physical risks. Villagers genuinely believe their animals receive divine protection through this ritual. They'll spend thousands of euros on veterinary bills after the festival, then sign up to do it again next year because tradition demands it. Modern safety improvements have crept in slowly. Fire departments now monitor blaze sizes more carefully. Veterinarians examine horses before allowing them to participate. Some basic crowd control measures keep spectators from getting too close to the action. But these changes face resistance from locals who worry that too much safety will diminish the blessing's spiritual power. International animal rights groups regularly condemn the festival, calling it animal abuse disguised as tradition. Local authorities defend it as cultural heritage, pointing out that no horses are intentionally harmed. The debate continues while the fires keep burning and the horses keep jumping. What makes this festival particularly fascinating is how it combines ancient spiritual beliefs with obviously modern dangers. Medieval villages didn't have crowds of tourists with cameras creating additional chaos. They didn't have social media encouraging increasingly spectacular stunts for viral videos. The blessing of the animals represents something deeper about human nature, our willingness to risk everything for beliefs that others might find completely irrational. These aren't thrill seekers looking for adrenaline rushes. They're ordinary people convinced that supernatural protection requires very real physical danger. Spanish fire festivals aren't the only celebrations where ancient traditions clash with modern safety concerns. But while some dangerous festivals are slowly dying out as younger generations seek safer alternatives, others persist despite mounting international pressure. And speaking of mounting pressure, there's one celebration where throwing things at each other has reached truly epic proportions. Bright colors flying through the air, laughter echoing through crowded streets, people dancing with rainbow powder coating their faces and clothes. Welcome to Holi, India's famous festival of colors, where spring arrives with an explosion of joy and chaos that would make your average safety inspector faint. But here's what travel brochures don't tell you: behind all that Instagram-worthy beauty lies a surprisingly dangerous celebration that sends thousands to hospitals every year. The very elements that make Holi so visually stunning create hazards most people never see coming. Let's start with those gorgeous colored powders everyone throws around. Traditional gulal was made from natural ingredients like turmeric and beetroot. Sounds harmless, right? Well, modern commercial powders tell a different story. Many contain industrial dyes, lead, mercury, and chromium, chemicals that definitely shouldn't be anywhere near your lungs or eyes. When thousands of people start hurling fistfuls of this stuff into the air, the entire celebration becomes a swirling cloud of potential toxins. Breathing becomes a real problem during peak celebration hours. The powder hangs in the air like colored fog, and people inhale it constantly without thinking twice. Asthma attacks spike dramatically during Holi season. Emergency rooms fill with people struggling to breathe, their airways irritated by hours of chemical exposure. Some celebrants develop severe allergic reactions, their skin breaking out in painful rashes that take weeks to heal. Then there's the eye damage. Flying powder doesn't discriminate. It gets everywhere, including places it shouldn't go. Corneal abrasions are incredibly common during Holi. People rub their eyes instinctively when powder gets in them, which only makes things worse. Temporary blindness isn't unusual, and some folks end up with permanent eye damage from particularly nasty chemical combinations. The water element adds another layer of danger most people overlook. Water balloons seem innocent enough until you're on the receiving end of one thrown with enthusiasm from a rooftop. These aren't gentle tosses. People launch them with serious force. Head injuries from water balloons are reported every year, with some requiring stitches or causing concussions. Children are especially vulnerable since they're closer to ground level where the impact is often harder. But the weird part is how the celebration itself becomes a safety hazard. Streets packed with revelers create perfect conditions for accidents. People slip on wet, powder-covered surfaces constantly. Broken bones from falls are routine during Holi. The combination of slippery conditions, reduced visibility from flying powder, and crowds moving in different directions creates a recipe for collisions and injuries. Traffic accidents spike during Holi festivities too. Drivers can't see clearly through powder-coated windshields, and celebrants often spill into roadways without warning. Vehicle crashes involving festival goers happen every year, sometimes with fatal results. Emergency services struggle to navigate through crowds and colored chaos to reach accident victims. Let's not forget how alcohol amplifies every risk. Many Holi celebrations involve bang, a traditional cannabis drink, plus plenty of regular alcohol. Judgment gets impaired, reflexes slow down, and people take risks they'd normally avoid. Fights break out more easily when everyone's inhibitions are lowered and emotions run high. What starts as playful color throwing can escalate into serious physical altercations surprisingly quickly. The crowd dynamics create their own hazards. Popular Holi locations can attract tens of thousands of people into spaces never designed for such numbers. Narrow streets become dangerously congested. When panic starts in a tightly packed crowd, maybe from rumors of trouble or just too many people pushing in one direction, stampedes become a real possibility. Women face additional dangers during Holi celebrations. The festival's anything-goes atmosphere, unfortunately, provides cover for inappropriate behavior. Sexual harassment and assault reports increase during Holi, with perpetrators using the crowded, chaotic environment and the excuse of festival traditions to justify unacceptable actions. Heat exhaustion poses another serious threat, especially during years when Holi falls during particularly warm weather. People spend hours outdoors in direct sunlight, often forgetting to drink enough water while they're caught up in the excitement. Dehydration combined with physical exertion and chemical exposure creates a perfect storm for medical emergencies. Modern safety awareness has improved things somewhat. Many cities now ban certain types of chemical powders and promote organic alternatives. Medical tents appear at major celebration sites. Police presence increases to manage crowds and prevent violence. Some organizers limit attendance numbers to reduce overcrowding risks. Despite all these hazards, millions still celebrate Holi every year because the joy and cultural significance outweigh the risks for most participants. The festival represents renewal, forgiveness, and community bonding, powerful draws that keep people coming back despite the dangers. What's fascinating is how this colorful celebration connects to an even more explosive tradition happening thousands of miles away in Mexico, where festival dangers take on an entirely different and far more literal meaning. Every year in Tultepec, Mexico, thousands of people gather for what might be the most explosive festival on Earth. They're not there for music or dancing. They're there to launch massive homemade fireworks at each other in crowded streets. The National Pyrotechnic Festival turns this small town into a war zone where the weapons are rockets and everyone's a willing target. The festival happens every March, and it's absolutely bonkers. Picture hundreds of people standing shoulder to shoulder while others fire homemade rockets directly into the crowd. These aren't your backyard 4th of July sparklers either. We're talking about powerful explosives that can blow holes in walls. The locals call them castillos, and they're basically towers of fireworks that shoot rockets in every direction once lit. Here's where it gets really wild. The goal isn't to avoid the fireworks, it's to stand as close as possible while they explode around you. People wear thick clothes and cover their faces, but that's about all the protection they get. The rockets whistle through the air, spinning wildly and landing wherever physics decides. Some people get hit directly, others dodge at the last second. Everyone cheers like it's the best thing ever. But this isn't just dangerous fun. People get seriously hurt every single year. Burns are the most common injury, ranging from minor singes to third-degree burns that require hospital treatment. The rockets can reach temperatures hot enough to melt metal, so when they hit bare skin, the damage is immediate and severe. Emergency medical teams work overtime during the festival, treating everything from burned hands to rocket-induced head injuries. Then there are the explosions that go wrong. Homemade fireworks are unpredictable beasts. Sometimes they explode too early, right in someone's hands. Other times they malfunction and explode with twice the expected force. The 2016 festival saw a particularly devastating accident when an entire fireworks market caught fire. The chain reaction of explosions killed dozens and injured hundreds more. Videos of the disaster showed massive mushroom clouds rising over the town while people ran for their lives. What makes this even crazier is that Tultepec is Mexico's fireworks capital. Making pyrotechnics isn't just a festival activity here, it's the main industry. Families have been crafting fireworks for generations, passing down recipes for explosive powder like other families share cookie recipes. The knowledge gets more dangerous with each generation too, as firework makers push the limits to create bigger, louder, more spectacular explosions. The festival itself transforms the entire town into a pyrotechnic battlefield. Streets fill with smoke so thick you can barely see 5 feet ahead. The noise is absolutely deafening, a constant barrage of explosions that can be heard miles away. Windows rattle, car alarms go off, and dogs hide under beds throughout the surrounding area. The air becomes so polluted with gunpowder smoke that breathing becomes difficult for anyone with respiratory issues. Let's not forget the fire hazard. When you're launching thousands of rockets in a densely packed town, things catch fire. Houses, market stalls, cars, anything flammable becomes a potential victim. The local fire department basically gives up trying to prevent fires and focuses entirely on damage control. They park trucks on every corner and just wait for the calls to start pouring in. And the weird part is, everyone knows how dangerous this is. The Mexican government has tried multiple times to shut down or regulate the festival, but the locals always find ways around the restrictions. They argue that it's their cultural heritage, their way of life. The risk is part of the tradition, not something to be eliminated. The economics of danger play a huge role too. The festival brings thousands of tourists to Tultepec, generating income for hotels, restaurants, and local businesses. Many families depend on festival season to make enough money to survive the rest of the year. Shutting down the festival would mean economic disaster for the entire town. Participants come from all over Mexico, and even other countries to experience this controlled chaos. They sign no waivers, receive no safety training, and get no guarantees that they'll go home uninjured. The appeal seems to be exactly that: uncertainty. the pure adrenaline rush of standing in the middle of an explosion while hoping nothing goes seriously wrong. The festival typically runs for several days, with different neighborhoods taking turns to show off their pyrotechnic skills. Each group tries to outdo the others with bigger rockets, more complex displays, and more spectacular explosions. Competition breeds innovation, and innovation in fireworks usually means more danger for everyone involved. Despite yearly injuries and occasional deaths, the National Pyrotechnic Festival continues to grow. More people attend each year, drawn by social media videos and word-of-mouth stories about the incredible spectacle. But there's something about massive crowds and dangerous situations that history shows us never ends well. The fireworks of Tultepec might seem chaotic, but there's something even more massive happening halfway around the world. Every summer in eastern India, over 1 million people gather in the city of Puri for one of the most spectacular and dangerous religious festivals on earth. The Rath Yatra, or Chariot Festival, revolves around 3 enormous wooden chariots that look like mobile temples. These aren't your average parade floats. The largest chariot stands 45 feet tall and weighs about 65 tons. That's heavier than most commercial trucks. But here's the catch: it doesn't have an engine. Instead, thousands of devotees grab thick ropes attached to the front of each chariot and pull these massive structures through the streets by hand. Think about that for a second. 65 tons of wood and metal being dragged along ancient roads by human power alone. The physics are already working against everyone involved. The festival honors Lord Jagannath, a form of the Hindu god Krishna. According to tradition, the deity must travel from his main temple to his summer residence about 2 miles away. Simple enough, right? Well, not when you're dealing with wheels that are 7 feet in diameter and a chariot that can barely fit down the street. Here's where things get deadly. When thousands of people are pulling rope in the same direction, momentum becomes a monster. Once these chariots start rolling, stopping them isn't easy. The wooden wheels don't have brakes. There's no steering wheel. If something goes wrong, physics takes over. People get caught under the wheels every year. Sometimes they trip while pulling rope. Other times they fall while trying to climb onto the moving chariot for a blessing. The crowd pushing from behind doesn't always see what's happening up front. When someone goes down, the chariot keeps rolling. But wait, there's more danger than just the chariots themselves. Over 1 million pilgrims pack into a city that normally holds about 200,000 people. The narrow streets of Puri weren't designed for crowds this size. People sleep on sidewalks, in doorways, anywhere they can find space. Sanitation becomes a nightmare. Food and water run short. The festival route passes through the heart of the old city, where buildings crowd close to the street. Windows and balconies overflow with spectators trying to get a glimpse of the chariots. Sometimes these old structures can't handle the extra weight. Balconies have collapsed, sending people tumbling into the crowd below. Then there's the heat. June temperatures in Puri regularly hit 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's in the shade. Most of the festival happens under the blazing sun. Thousands of people pulling heavy ropes in extreme heat, while packed shoulder to shoulder, creates perfect conditions for heat exhaustion and dehydration. Emergency services struggle to reach people in trouble. When someone collapses in the middle of a 1 million-person crowd, getting an ambulance through becomes nearly impossible. Medical teams have learned to position themselves along the route, but they can only do so much when the crowd is this dense. The weird part is that getting crushed by a chariot during Rath Yatra is considered by some devotees to be a blessed way to die. This belief actually increases the danger, because some people deliberately try to get as close as possible to the moving wheels. The English word juggernaut, meaning an unstoppable destructive force, comes directly from Jagannath and this festival. Despite modern safety efforts, accidents still happen. Barriers now line parts of the route, and police try to control crowd flow, but tradition runs deep. Many devotees see safety measures as interference with their religious duty. They believe touching the rope or the chariot brings spiritual merit, so they'll take risks to get close. Local authorities face an impossible choice. They can't cancel a festival that's been running for over 500 years and forms the spiritual heart of the community. But they also can't guarantee safety when dealing with crowds this size and chariots this massive. It's like trying to make a volcano eruption safe. Some forces of nature resist human control. The festival continues because for believers, the spiritual reward outweighs the physical risk. They see Lord Jagannath's journey as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for blessing and purification. The danger becomes part of the devotion, not a reason to stay away. Modern technology helps somewhat. Cell phone networks allow faster communication with emergency services. Weather monitoring provides warnings about extreme heat. But the basic elements, massive wooden chariots, enormous crowds, narrow streets, remain unchanged. Every year brings the same tension between faith and safety, tradition and common sense. The chariots roll forward regardless, pulled by thousands of hands and powered by centuries of belief. Of course, not all festival disasters happen because of ancient traditions or religious fervor. Sometimes the deadliest festival moments come from something far more modern and unexpected. The late 1990s were supposed to be about peace, love, and music. At least that's what the organizers of Woodstock '99 promised when they tried to recreate the magic of the original 1969 festival. What they delivered instead was a perfect storm of corporate greed, inadequate planning, and human desperation that turned a music celebration into something resembling a war zone. July in Rome, New York isn't exactly known for mild weather. Temperatures soared past 100 degrees Fahrenheit, turning the festival grounds into what felt like a concrete oven. The original Woodstock happened on a farm with grass, trees, and natural shade. This version, they chose an abandoned Air Force base. Picture trying to enjoy music while standing on hot asphalt with zero natural cover from the blazing sun. But the heat was just the beginning of the nightmare. Festival organizers decided to ban outside food and drinks, forcing nearly 400,000 attendees to buy everything from overpriced concession stands. Water bottles cost $4 each. In 1999 money, that's highway robbery during a heat emergency. People started collapsing from dehydration faster than medical tents could handle them. Then there were the bathrooms, or rather the lack of functional ones. Portable toilets overflowed by day 2, creating unsanitary conditions that would make a truck stop look like a luxury spa. The smell alone was enough to knock you over, but festival goers had no choice but to deal with it. Some people just gave up and relieved themselves wherever they could find space. The weird part is how quickly things escalated from uncomfortable to dangerous. By Saturday night, frustrated crowds started expressing their anger in increasingly violent ways. During Limp Bizkit's performance, lead singer Fred Durst kept encouraging the already agitated crowd to break stuff. Apparently they took his advice seriously. Really seriously. Sexual assaults began happening in broad daylight. Women reported being groped, attacked, and worse while trying to enjoy performances. Security guards were either overwhelmed or simply looked the other way. The festival that was supposed to celebrate peace and love had devolved into something predatory and cruel. Well, it gets worse. Vendor booths started getting looted as people decided they weren't going to pay inflated prices anymore. ATM machines were toppled and destroyed. Merchandise tents were ransacked. The crowd had essentially declared war on anyone trying to make money off their misery. Sunday night brought the grand finale of chaos. During the Red Hot Chili Peppers closing set, someone handed out candles for what was supposed to be a peaceful tribute. Instead, people used those candles to start fires. Small blazes quickly spread to vendor booths, stages, and anything else that would burn. The smell of smoke mixed with the stench of overflowing toilets created an apocalyptic atmosphere. Rioters flipped cars and set them ablaze. They tore down sound towers and lighting rigs worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Peace signs from the original Woodstock were replaced with middle fingers and destructive rage. Emergency responders struggled to reach injured people through the chaos and flames. MTV was broadcasting parts of the festival live, giving the world a front-row seat to the madness. Viewers watched in horror, as what was supposed to be a nostalgic celebration turned into something that belonged in a disaster movie. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The generation that invented peace, love, and music was watching their children burn it all down. 3 people died during the festival, hundreds more were injured, many seriously. Sexual assault reports numbered in the dozens, though many incidents likely went unreported. The financial damage ran into millions of dollars, but the damage to the Woodstock brand was immeasurable. Makes sense, right? When you treat people like walking ATM machines, deny them basic necessities during extreme weather, and create unsafe conditions, they eventually fight back. The organizers learned the hard way that you can't slap a famous name on a poorly planned money grab and expect good results. State police finally restored order, but not before the entire event became a cautionary tale about festival planning. The contrast with the original Woodstock couldn't have been more stark. Where the 1969 festival represented hope and unity, Woodstock '99 showed what happens when corporate greed meets human desperation. The aftermath led to serious discussions about festival safety and crowd psychology. Experts began studying how heat, dehydration, overpricing, and poor facilities could turn even peaceful music fans into an angry mob. But this wouldn't be the last time massive crowds at music events would face deadly consequences. Speaking of which, let's not forget that Germany was about to learn some equally harsh lessons about what happens when festival planning goes catastrophically wrong. Electronic music pounded through massive speakers as over 1 million people packed the streets of Duisburg, Germany. July 24, 2010. The Love Parade had drawn ravers from across Europe for what would become one of the deadliest festival disasters in modern history. This wasn't just any music festival. The Love Parade had been running since 1989, growing from a small Berlin street party into a massive cultural phenomenon. Techno beats, neon colors, dancing until dawn. For 21 years it represented pure celebration and unity through music. But something went terribly wrong in 2010. The organizers made a crucial mistake. They moved the event from Berlin to Duisburg and chose the worst possible location. An old freight train area with limited access points. The main entrance, a narrow tunnel that served as both the way in and the way out. Picture this setup. You've got over 1 million excited festival goers trying to funnel through a tunnel that could barely handle a fraction of that crowd. The tunnel measured just 18 meters wide. Do the math, that's asking for trouble. As the day progressed, more people kept arriving while others tried to leave. The tunnel became a bottleneck of epic proportions. Dense crowds moved in opposite directions, creating a human traffic jam that grew more dangerous by the minute. Around 5 p.m., panic struck. Nobody knows exactly what triggered it. Some witnesses said people started climbing the walls to escape the crushing pressure. Others reported that festival goers began falling down a steep ramp. What's certain is that once panic started, it spread like wildfire through the packed tunnel. People couldn't move forward, they couldn't move backward. The crowd became so dense that some festival goers were lifted off their feet entirely, carried along by the sheer force of human bodies pressed together. The crushing began. When crowds reach a certain density, about 6 people per square meter, individual movement becomes impossible. Bodies get compressed so tightly that people can't expand their chests to breathe. It's called crowd crush, and it's absolutely terrifying. Emergency responders struggled to reach the scene. How do you get ambulances through streets packed with 1 million people? Police officers tried to create escape routes, but the crowd dynamics had already spiraled out of control. 21 people died that day. Most were young teenagers and people in their 20s who'd come to dance and celebrate. Over 500 others were injured, many suffering from severe trauma that would haunt them for years. The weird part is that many festival goers outside the tunnel area had no idea anything was wrong. Music kept playing. People kept dancing. The deadly disaster unfolded in one concentrated spot while the rest of the event continued normally. Investigations afterward revealed a cascade of planning failures. The venue choice was questionable from the start. Crowd control measures were inadequate. Emergency exits were insufficient. Warning systems failed to work properly when they were needed most. But here's what makes this tragedy particularly heartbreaking. It was completely preventable. Crowd safety experts had warned about the dangers of using that location. They'd pointed out the obvious problems with having just one main access point for such a massive event. The organizers ignored those warnings. Legal proceedings dragged on for years. Families of victims fought for accountability. The festival's founder faced charges of negligent homicide, though he was eventually acquitted. The city of Duisburg paid millions in settlements, but no amount of money could undo the damage. The Love Parade died with those 21 victims. After more than 2 decades of bringing joy to millions, the festival was permanently cancelled. The brand that once symbolized peace, love, unity, and respect became forever associated with tragedy and poor planning. Emergency protocols at festivals worldwide changed because of what happened in Duisburg. Venue designers now study crowd flow patterns obsessively. Exit strategies get tested and retested. Capacity limits became non-negotiable safety requirements rather than mere suggestions. The disaster taught the festival industry a harsh lesson about the physics of human crowds. When you pack enough people into a confined space, individual choice disappears. People become part of a larger force that nobody can control. Modern festivals now employ crowd density monitoring systems. They use barriers to prevent dangerous bottlenecks. Multiple entry and exit points are mandatory. Real-time crowd tracking helps identify danger zones before panic starts. German authorities still study the Love Parade disaster in emergency management training. The tunnel that claimed 21 lives serves as a permanent reminder of what happens when celebration planning goes catastrophically wrong. The electronic music scene continues, but the shadow of Duisburg looms over every large gathering. Festival safety became a matter of life and death, not just crowd comfort. The Love Parade wasn't the last time festival crowds would turn deadly. Just over a decade later, another music event would prove that even with all these hard-learned lessons, tragedy could still strike when things go wrong. November 5, 2021. Houston, Texas. The Astroworld Festival was supposed to be Travis Scott's triumphant return to his hometown. 50,000 fans packed into NRG Park for what everyone hoped would be an unforgettable night. Well, it was unforgettable, just not in the way anyone wanted. The trouble started before Scott even took the stage. Fans who didn't have tickets were jumping fences and rushing security gates. Videos from that afternoon show hundreds of people literally trampling over barriers like they're conquering a small country. Security guards, they looked completely overwhelmed. The whole setup was already falling apart, and the headliner hadn't even shown up yet. When Scott finally appeared around 9 p.m., the crowd surged forward like a tidal wave. But here's the thing about human crowds, they behave more like liquid than you'd expect. When 50,000 people all push in the same direction at once, the folks in the back have no idea what's happening up front. They just keep pushing forward, not knowing that people ahead of them are getting crushed. The really scary part, some fans were begging security guards and camera operators for help while the show continued. Videos later surfaced of concertgoers screaming "Stop the show" and climbing on platforms desperately trying to get someone's attention. A few people even jumped onto the camera platforms, but their cries got lost in the chaos and noise. Then there's the communication breakdown that made everything worse. Festival staff, security teams and emergency responders weren't on the same radio frequency. Makes sense, right? When you're dealing with a massive crisis, you definitely want your emergency teams unable to talk to each other. The police declared it a mass casualty event at 9:38 p.m., but the show didn't stop until after 10 p.m. Travis Scott later said he had no idea what was happening in the crowd. Critics pointed out that other artists have stopped shows for much less serious situations. The footage is haunting. You can see Scott performing while an ambulance tries to push through the crowd just yards away from the stage. Emergency vehicles with flashing lights became part of the backdrop while people continued dancing nearby. The barrier system turned into a death trap. Festival designers created sections using metal barriers, but when the crowd surged, people got pinned against these structures with nowhere to go. The human body can only take about 50 pounds of pressure before ribs start cracking. In a crowd surge, that pressure can easily hit 1,000 pounds per square foot. Your math doesn't need to be perfect to see where this leads. What really gets people angry is how predictable this was. Astroworld had crowd control problems in previous years. Scott had been arrested twice before for encouraging fans to rush the stage and ignore security. There were warning signs everywhere, like a trail of breadcrumbs leading to disaster. Festival organizers just chose to ignore them. The youngest victim was only 9 years old. Ezra Blount had been sitting on his father's shoulders when the crowd surge began. He suffered severe brain trauma and died days later in the hospital. The oldest victim was 27. 10 people total lost their lives, and hundreds more were injured. Some are still dealing with trauma, both physical and mental. Years later, emergency medical staff described scenes that looked more like a war zone than a concert. People were getting CPR while others were still dancing just feet away. The festival had hired a company called Paradox to handle medical emergencies, but they were completely overwhelmed. Some witnesses said it took over 30 minutes for ambulances to reach victims because of the crowd density. The lawsuits started flying almost immediately. Over 400 separate cases were filed against Travis Scott, Live Nation, and other parties involved in organizing the event. Families wanted answers about how a music festival could turn so deadly so quickly. The legal battles are still ongoing, with settlements reaching hundreds of millions of dollars. But here's what makes Astroworld different from historical festival disasters. It happened in the age of social media. Everything was recorded. TikTok videos, Instagram stories, Snapchats. There's more documentation of this tragedy than almost any festival disaster in history. You can watch the horror unfold in real time from dozens of different angles. Live Nation, the event's promoter, had been involved in other festival safety issues before Astroworld. Critics started calling them out for prioritizing profits over safety at venues across the country. When you're dealing with that many people in one space, cutting corners on safety isn't just stupid, it's deadly. The festival world took notice immediately. New crowd control measures started appearing at major events within months. But as we'll see, even the deadliest crowd surge in recent memory wasn't enough to prevent other kinds of violence from finding their way into festival spaces. Sometimes the danger doesn't come from the crowd itself, but from someone hiding within it. Las Vegas in October 2017 should have been just another weekend of music and fun. The Route 91 Harvest Festival was winding down its 3-day run, with country music fans spread across a massive outdoor venue. Jason Aldean was on stage, performing to over 22,000 people who had no idea they were about to witness the deadliest mass shooting in modern American history. At 10:05 p.m., the first shots rang out. Most people thought they were hearing fireworks. Makes sense, right? Festival goers are used to loud noises, pyrotechnics, and celebration sounds. But these weren't fireworks. A gunman had positioned himself on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel, roughly 400 yards away from the concert grounds. From that vantage point, he had a clear view of thousands of unsuspecting people packed together like sardines. The shooter had been planning this attack for months. He'd booked multiple hotel rooms overlooking different festival sites in Las Vegas and Chicago. His room was stocked with 23 firearms, including semi-automatic rifles modified with bump stocks to simulate automatic fire. The preparation was meticulous and terrifying. When people realized what was happening, panic erupted instantly. The festival grounds had limited exits, and thousands of people tried to escape at once. Some dropped to the ground and played dead. Others tried to help wounded strangers. Many ran toward the stage, thinking it offered protection, while others sprinted toward the parking lots and nearby buildings. The shooting lasted for about 10 minutes, but those 10 minutes felt like hours for everyone trapped in that open field. The gunman fired more than 1,100 rounds into the crowd. 60 people died that night, and over 400 others suffered gunshot wounds. An additional 400+ people were injured in the stampede that followed. Broken bones, cuts, bruises, and trampling injuries added to the casualty count. Emergency responders faced an impossible situation. How do you treat hundreds of gunshot victims simultaneously? Ambulances couldn't reach the scene quickly because of the chaos. Concert-goers used anything they could find as stretchers, pieces of fencing, shirts, even beer cases. They loaded wounded people into pickup trucks, cars, and wheelbarrows to get them to hospitals. The hotels surrounding the festival became makeshift medical stations. The weird part is how quickly ordinary people became heroes. Nurses who were attending the festival immediately started treating victims. Off-duty police officers helped coordinate evacuations. Complete strangers carried wounded people to safety, often risking their own lives to save others. Then there's the psychological damage that extends far beyond that October night. Survivors developed PTSD, anxiety disorders, and depression. Some couldn't attend large gatherings anymore. Others struggled with survivor's guilt, wondering why they lived when others didn't. The trauma rippled through families, friendships, and entire communities. The investigation revealed disturbing details about the shooter's preparation. He'd conducted surveillance on multiple venues and events. His hotel room looked like an armory, with cameras set up in the hallway to monitor approaching security. He'd even calculated wind speed and bullet trajectory. The level of planning was both sophisticated and sickening. But why did he do it? That question still haunts investigators and survivors alike. No clear motive was ever established. The shooter had no known ties to terrorist organizations, no obvious political agenda, and no history of violence against strangers. He was a wealthy retiree who enjoyed gambling and seemed to live a quiet life. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones nobody suspects. Security at music festivals changed dramatically after Route 91. Metal detectors became standard, bag checks got more thorough, hotels increased surveillance of guests bringing large amounts of luggage. Many venues installed barriers and added more exit routes. The festival industry realized that external threats could be just as deadly as internal crowd problems. Legal battles followed for years. Survivors and families of victims filed hundreds of lawsuits against the hotel, the festival organizers, and even the gun manufacturers. The arguments centered on whether enough security measures had been in place and whether the attack could have been prevented with better planning. MGM Resorts, which owned the Mandalay Bay, eventually agreed to pay up to $800 million to settle the lawsuits. The money couldn't bring back the dead or erase the trauma, but it acknowledged that better security protocols might have made a difference. The Route 91 shooting proved that festivals face threats no one had seriously considered before. Previous safety concerns focused on crowd crushes, fires and medical emergencies within the venue itself. Nobody had planned for a sniper attack from a nearby building. The tragedy forced the entire live entertainment industry to rethink what safe actually means. Yet this wasn't the last time gun violence would shatter the festival atmosphere. Other events would soon face their own terrifying encounters with armed attackers. The year 2023 brought a chilling reminder that festival dangers aren't just stuck in the past. Beyond Wonderland, an electronic dance music festival in Washington state, was supposed to be a weekend of colorful costumes, pulsing beats, and good vibes. Instead, it became the scene of a nightmare that left 2 people dead and several others wounded. James Kelly, a 26-year-old festival goer, had been enjoying the music when hallucinogenic drugs twisted his reality into something dark and terrifying. What started as a typical festival experience turned deadly when Kelly pulled out a gun and opened fire on fellow attendees. The shooting happened around 8:25 p.m. on Saturday night, right in the heart of the crowd. The chaos was immediate and brutal. Festival speakers that moments before had been pumping out electronic beats suddenly went silent. Emergency announcements crackled through the sound system, telling everyone to evacuate immediately. But here's the thing about sudden violence at festivals. People don't always know what's happening at first. Some thought it was part of the show. Others assumed it was fireworks or technical problems. Then reality hit like a sledgehammer. Festival goers scattered in every direction, trampling over blankets, abandoned drinks and dropped phones. The same narrow pathways that funneled people into the festival grounds now became bottlenecks of panic. People pushed, shoved, and climbed over barriers to escape what they couldn't fully understand but knew was dangerous. Security personnel, trained for typical festival problems like drunk troublemakers or medical emergencies, suddenly found themselves dealing with an active shooter situation. They worked frantically to evacuate the estimated 20,000 attendees while coordinating with law enforcement. The Grant County Sheriff's Office responded within minutes, but those minutes felt like hours to people running for their lives. Kelly didn't make it far. Officers quickly located and arrested him, but the damage was already done. 2 innocent people had lost their lives simply for wanting to dance to music they loved. Several others required hospital treatment for their injuries. The festival, which was supposed to continue through Sunday, was immediately cancelled. But wait, here's where it gets even more disturbing. Investigation revealed that Kelly had consumed what he believed to be psilocybin mushrooms, commonly called magic mushrooms. Instead, he'd taken something far more dangerous. Toxicology reports suggested he'd ingested a substance that caused severe psychotic episodes and violent hallucinations. His defense team later claimed he had no memory of the shooting and believed he was defending himself against imaginary threats. The aftermath sent shockwaves through the festival industry. Beyond Wonderland had been running successfully for years without major incidents. Security screenings, medical tents, and safety protocols were all in place. Yet none of that mattered when someone brought drugs that turned their brain into a weapon. Festival organizers faced immediate scrutiny about their security measures. How had Kelly gotten a gun past security checkpoints? Were bag searches thorough enough? Should there be metal detectors at every entrance? These questions haunted industry professionals who realized that even their best safety measures had blind spots. The legal ramifications were swift and severe. Kelly was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and multiple counts of assault. His trial became a focal point for debates about drug-induced violence, personal responsibility, and festival security. Families of the victims filed lawsuits against both the shooter and the festival organizers, arguing that better security could have prevented the tragedy. What makes this case particularly unsettling is how it represents a new category of festival danger. Unlike stampedes or fires, which can often be predicted and prevented through proper planning, this was an individual's drug-altered mind turning deadly. No amount of crowd control or emergency exits could have stopped those first few seconds of violence. The incident sparked conversations about drug testing services at festivals. Some events now offer anonymous testing, where attendees can check their substances for dangerous adulterants. Others have increased their security presence and implemented stricter entry procedures. But festival organizers face a difficult balance. Too much security creates a prison-like atmosphere that kills the free-spirited vibe people come for. Mental health experts pointed out that mixing large crowds, loud music, unfamiliar environments, and mind-altering substances creates a perfect storm for psychological breaks. The sensory overload that makes festivals exciting for most people can become overwhelming and terrifying for someone experiencing a bad drug reaction. Beyond Wonderland 2023 proved that modern festivals face threats their predecessors never imagined. Ancient festivals had human sacrifices and medieval celebrations had uncontrolled fires, but today's events must contend with the unpredictable dangers of synthetic drugs and their effects on human behavior. The tragedy reminded everyone that festival safety isn't just about structural engineering or crowd management anymore. Sometimes the biggest threat comes from the person standing right next to you, dancing to the same music until something goes terribly wrong in their mind. Speaking of substances turning deadly at festivals, the Beyond Wonderland shooting wasn't an isolated incident when it comes to drugs creating havoc at these events. Electronic music pulsed through the night air as thousands of young faces glowed under neon lights. Dancing until dawn seemed like the only option. But beneath the euphoric atmosphere of modern music festivals lurks a silent killer that claims lives year after year. We're not talking about stampedes or structural collapses this time. The real danger often comes in tiny pills, colorful powders, and liquid vials that promise transcendence but deliver tragedy instead. Festival drug overdoses have become so common that emergency medical tents are now considered essential infrastructure, right alongside sound systems and porta potties. Makes sense, right? When you're dealing with tens of thousands of people, many experimenting with substances they've never tried before, the math becomes terrifyingly simple. Take Electric Daisy Carnival in Las Vegas. In 2010, a 15-year-old girl died from an MDMA overdose during the 3-day event. Her death wasn't isolated, it was part of a pattern that forced the festival to relocate and implement stricter safety measures. But here's the thing that'll shock you, that wasn't even close to being the worst festival drug tragedy on record. Then there's Electric Zoo in New York, where 2 people died from overdoses in 2013, forcing organizers to cancel the final day. The victims had consumed what they thought was pure MDMA, but street drugs are about as reliable as a chocolate teapot. You never know what you're actually getting. And that uncertainty turns every pill into a potential death sentence. The problem isn't just about hard drugs either. Festival goers have died from combinations that seemed harmless, mixing alcohol with prescription medications, or taking legal highs that turned out to be anything but safe. One particularly tragic case involved a college student who died after consuming what he believed was a mild hallucinogen, only to discover too late that it contained synthetic compounds that shut down his organs. Well, festivals have tried to adapt. Many now employ harm reduction programs that sound almost too progressive to believe. These programs don't encourage drug use, but they acknowledge the reality that people will experiment regardless of warnings. They provide testing stations where attendees can anonymously check their substances for dangerous adulterants. The weird part is, this actually works. Studies show that when people know what they're taking, overdose rates drop significantly. But why do festival environments make drug tragedies so much more likely? The answer involves a perfect storm of factors that would make any emergency responder nervous. First, you've got extreme heat and dehydration, which amplifies the effects of most substances. Add sleep deprivation from multi-day events, and suddenly your body can't process drugs the way it normally would. Let's not forget the social pressure aspect. Festival culture often glorifies drug experimentation as part of the authentic experience. Young people, many trying substances for the first time, make decisions they'd never consider in normal circumstances. Peer pressure at 3 in the morning, surrounded by pounding bass and flashing lights, hits different than it does in your suburban bedroom. The most dangerous substances at festivals read like a chemistry textbook gone wrong. MDMA, commonly known as ecstasy or Molly, causes hypothermia and dehydration. Synthetic drugs like K2 or Spice create unpredictable reactions that even experienced medical professionals struggle to treat. LSD and psilocybin mushrooms, while less likely to cause physical overdoses, can trigger psychological breaks that lead to fatal accidents. Opioids present their own nightmare scenario. Fentanyl, a synthetic opioid 50 times stronger than heroin, has infiltrated festival drug supplies across the country. Users expecting a mild high instead receive a potentially lethal dose. Emergency responders now carry naloxone Narcan as standard equipment, but even this life-saving antidote has limitations when dealing with such powerful synthetic compounds. Festival medical teams have become surprisingly sophisticated in their approach to drug-related emergencies. They've learned to spot the signs of different overdoses and respond accordingly. Overheating from stimulants requires immediate cooling and IV fluids. Opioid overdoses need naloxone and respiratory support. Psychedelic bad trips often just need calm, reassuring environments away from the chaos. Some festivals have gone further, partnering with organizations like Dance Safe to provide on-site drug education and testing. These groups operate in legal gray areas, but their presence has undoubtedly saved lives. When someone knows their pills contain dangerous adulterants, they're more likely to make safer choices. The statistics paint a sobering picture. Emergency room visits spike dramatically during major festival weekends, with drug-related incidents making up a significant percentage of cases. Cities hosting large festivals now prepare their hospitals for influxes of overdose patients, scheduling extra staff and stocking additional antidotes. Despite these preventable tragedies happening year after year, the festival scene continues growing. Each summer brings new events and new risks, but also new safety innovations. However, even the most sophisticated medical response can't address every dangerous situation, especially when festival goers face threats that go beyond individual choice and into the realm of mass psychology and crowd dynamics. Drug overdoses grab headlines, mass shootings spark debates, but there's another festival killer that's been claiming lives for centuries, and most people barely think about it until it's too late: human stampedes. The math is terrifying. Take thousands of people, pack them into a space designed for hundreds, add panic, and you've created a killing machine more efficient than any single gunman. Bodies become projectiles, breathing becomes impossible, escape routes turn into death traps. The 2010 Love Parade disaster in Germany wasn't some freak accident, it was physics in action. Over 1 million electronic music fans descended on Duisburg, a city that had never hosted anything close to that scale. The main access point, a tunnel, one tunnel. When panic hit, that tunnel became a human blender. 21 people died. Not from bullets or drugs or fires, from other people. But here's what makes stampedes truly horrifying. They're almost always preventable. The warning signs are everywhere. Too many people, too few exits, poor communication, inadequate crowd control. Festival organizers see these red flags and somehow convince themselves it'll work out fine. The Seoul Halloween crowd crush, in 2022, killed 159 people. The crowd density reached levels where individual choice ceased to exist. People weren't walking anymore. They were being carried by the mass of bodies. When someone fell, physics took over. Human dominoes, but with broken bones and crushed lungs. Then there's the Hajj pilgrimage stampedes. These aren't technically festivals, but the crowd dynamics are identical. The 2015 stampede killed over 2,400 people during a ritual stone-throwing ceremony. Imagine dying because too many people wanted to throw rocks at a wall representing Satan. The irony would be funny if it weren't so tragic. What triggers these death waves? Sometimes it's as simple as someone shouting fire in a crowded space. Other times, it's a celebrity appearing unexpectedly. At the 1979 Who concert in Cincinnati, fans rushed toward the venue thinking the show had started. 11 people were trampled to death before the band even took the stage. The psychology is fascinating and terrifying. Crowds develop their own intelligence, or lack thereof. Individual rational thinking gets swallowed by collective panic. People who would never hurt a fly in normal circumstances become part of a crushing wave that kills their neighbors. Modern festival designers study something called crowd density metrics. 6 people per square meter is manageable. 7 gets dangerous. 8 or more, and you're in the death zone. People literally cannot control their own movement anymore. The crowd moves them. Security experts talk about crowd fluids, the way human masses behave like water finding the path of least resistance. But unlike water, human crowds can compress and create deadly pressure waves. A surge at the back of a crowd creates a domino effect that crushes people hundreds of feet away. The worst part about stampede deaths: they're often slow. People don't get trampled like in the movies. They get compressed against barriers or other bodies until they can't breathe. Positional asphyxia, the medical examiners call it. Your body position makes breathing impossible, and there's nothing you can do about it. Festival organizers have learned, though, mostly, modern crowd control uses something called crowd modeling software that predicts dangerous bottlenecks before they happen. Exit strategies get planned like military operations. Barriers are designed to bend rather than create deadly compression points. The really smart festivals use pulse release systems. Instead of opening all the doors at once when the show ends, they control the flow like water from a faucet. It takes longer, but it prevents the human tsunami that kills people. Some venues now have crowd density cameras that can count heads in real time and trigger alerts when dangerous levels are reached. It's like having a heart monitor for the entire festival. But technology can't fix everything. The fundamental problem remains: humans love to gather in large groups, and large groups can become deadly without warning. Every festival is a calculated risk between human nature and crowd physics. The scariest stampedes happen when people are trying to escape something else. A fire alarm, a perceived threat, even just rumors spreading through social media. The attempt to avoid one danger creates an even deadlier one. What's really wild is how quickly these situations develop. Security footage from various stampedes shows the same pattern: normal crowd movement, then a slight increase in density, then suddenly, chaos. The transition from safe to deadly can happen in under 30 seconds. Of course, stampedes aren't the only hidden danger lurking at festivals. While organizers focus on crowd control and exit strategies, there's another threat that's been poisoning festival goers for centuries, and it's hiding in plain sight at every food truck and vendor stall. Food poisoning doesn't sound nearly as dramatic as getting trampled by bulls or shot with homemade rockets. But here's the thing about festivals and food: when things go wrong, they go really wrong for hundreds or thousands of people at once. Back in medieval times, festival food was basically a game of stomach roulette. No refrigeration, no health inspectors, no hand-washing stations. Just vendors selling whatever they could cook over open flames to massive crowds who had been walking for days to get there. The result? Mass food poisoning outbreaks that could kill more people than any gladiator fight. Take the famous Bartholomew Fair in London during the 1300s. This thing lasted 2 weeks every August, drawing people from across England. Street vendors sold everything from roasted meat pies to questionable ale. The problem was that meat left sitting in summer heat for hours or days becomes a breeding ground for bacteria. Add in the fact that most people had no idea about basic food safety, and you've got a recipe for disaster. Historical records from various European festivals describe sudden waves of illness sweeping through crowds. People would start vomiting and collapsing within hours of each other. The medieval term for it was festival fever, but it was really just mass food poisoning on an epic scale. Then, there's the water situation. Early festivals rarely had clean water sources for the thousands of attendees. People drank from the same wells, streams or barrels that might be contaminated with sewage or animal waste. Cholera outbreaks at festivals were common enough that some cities actually banned large gatherings during certain times of year. The weird part is that people kept coming back, year after year, knowing that festival food might literally kill them. Crowds would show up ready to eat whatever was available. The social aspect of festivals was apparently worth risking your life for a sketchy meat pie. Fast forward to more recent times, and you'd think we'd have figured this out. Well, not exactly. The 1985 Rajneeshi bioterror attack in Oregon wasn't at a festival, but it showed how easily food poisoning can be weaponized at large gatherings. The group deliberately contaminated salad bars at restaurants, making over 750 people sick. It was a wake-up call about food security at public events. But even without intentional poisoning, modern festivals still struggle with food safety. Coachella 2006 saw dozens of people hospitalized with severe food poisoning traced back to undercooked chicken from one of the food vendors. The vendor had been serving thousands of people before anyone realized there was a problem. Music festivals present unique challenges for food safety. Vendors are often working in temporary setups without proper kitchen facilities. They're serving massive volumes of food in short time periods. The pressure to keep lines moving fast can lead to shortcuts in food handling. Plus, many festival goers are drinking alcohol, which can mask the early signs of food poisoning until it's too late. Electric Daisy Carnival in Las Vegas has had multiple incidents over the years. The desert heat makes food safety even trickier. Anything left out too long becomes dangerous fast. Festival medical tents regularly treat people for food poisoning symptoms, though many cases probably go unreported because people assume they're just hungover or dehydrated. The scariest part about festival food poisoning is how quickly it can spread. Unlike other festival dangers that might affect individuals, contaminated food can take down hundreds of people simultaneously. Imagine half the attendees at a 3-day camping festival getting violently ill at the same time. The medical facilities that can handle a few broken bones or overdoses suddenly become completely overwhelmed. International festivals add another layer of risk. Street food that locals have built immunity to can devastate visitors. Food handling standards vary wildly between countries. What passes for safe in one place might be considered dangerous elsewhere. Modern festivals have gotten much better at food safety, but it's still not foolproof. Health inspectors now regularly check festival vendors. Temperature controls are monitored. Hand washing stations are mandatory. Most major festivals require vendors to have food safety certifications, yet problems still pop up. Smaller festivals or underground events often skip these precautions to save money. Food trucks that seem legitimate might not follow proper protocols when they're dealing with festival crowds 10 times their normal size. The irony is that festival food has become part of the experience. People travel across the country partly for the unique food offerings. Social media is full of photos of festival meals, but lurking behind every Instagram-worthy food shot is the same basic risk that medieval fairgoers faced, trusting strangers to prepare your food safely under less than ideal conditions. Food poisoning might not have the dramatic flair of other festival disasters, but it's proven remarkably persistent across centuries of human celebration. Even as we've conquered many other festival dangers, the simple act of eating remains surprisingly risky when you're dealing with large crowds and temporary setups. Speaking of environmental risks that catch people off guard, the weather itself has always posed threats that festival organizers struggle to predict and control. Weather doesn't care about your festival plans, never has, never will. When Mother Nature decides to crash the party, she brings everything from scorching heat that melts brain cells to floods that turn dance floors into disaster zones. And the worst part, people keep showing up anyway, acting like a little sunshine or drizzle won't hurt anyone. Woodstock 1999 proved just how deadly the sun can be. Temperatures soared past 100 degrees Fahrenheit, turning the festival grounds into a human oven. Water cost $4 a bottle. Highway robbery, when people were literally dying of thirst. Dehydration hit attendees so hard that medical tents looked like battlefield hospitals. But here's the kicker. Sunstroke was just the appetizer before the main course of riots and chaos that followed. Then there's lightning, nature's own fireworks show that nobody wants front row seats to. Rock concerts and thunderstorms make terrible roommates. In 2004, a lightning strike at a music festival in Germany sent dozens to the hospital. The bolt didn't even hit people directly. It traveled through wet ground and metal barriers, turning the entire area into an electric nightmare. Imagine dancing to your favorite song 1 second and getting zapped by Zeus the next. Rain sounds harmless enough, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. Mud becomes the enemy when thousands of feet churn dirt into slippery death traps. Falls increase dramatically during wet festivals. Broken bones, twisted ankles and concussions pile up faster than roadies can set up equipment. Belgium's Pukkelpop Festival in 2011 learned this lesson the hard way when violent storms killed 5 people and injured over 140 others. Trees fell like dominoes, stages collapsed, and what started as a music celebration turned into a rescue operation. Flash floods present perhaps the scariest scenario of all. Water moves faster than panic, and festival campsites often sit in low-lying areas that become death traps when storms hit. Arkansas's Riverfront Blues Festival faced this nightmare when sudden flooding swept through camping areas. Tents, cars and people got caught in rushing water that appeared out of nowhere. The lucky ones lost everything they owned. Others lost much more. Let's not forget about wind, the invisible killer that turns innocent festival decorations into flying weapons. Stage structures that look solid become giant sails when gusts pick up. In 2011, Indiana's State Fair saw their outdoor stage collapse when winds hit 70 miles per hour. 7 people died, dozens more were crushed. The twisted metal and debris created a scene that looked more like a war zone than a place where families came to hear music and eat corn dogs. Heat exhaustion doesn't discriminate, young, old, fit, or out of shape. The sun will cook anyone who underestimates its power. Coachella has dealt with this reality for years, watching attendees drop like flies when temperatures climb. Medical teams now train specifically for heat-related emergencies because they're guaranteed to happen. Dehydration leads to confusion. Confusion leads to poor decisions, and poor decisions at festivals can turn fatal fast. But why do people ignore weather warnings? Simple: they've already bought tickets, booked hotels and planned their entire weekend around 3 days of music and mayhem. A little rain or shine won't stop them from seeing their favorite band. This stubborn dedication creates dangerous situations when festival organizers face impossible choices between safety and profit. Modern festivals have learned to watch weather like hawks. Doppler radar, emergency plans and evacuation procedures are now standard operating equipment. Weather apps buzz with warnings and stages shut down at the first sign of dangerous conditions. Makes sense, right? Yet people still complain when lightning forces a headliner to cancel their set, as if getting electrocuted would somehow improve the concert experience. The weird part is how quickly weather can flip from perfect to deadly. One minute you're enjoying sunshine and gentle breezes, the next you're running for cover as hail the size of golf balls starts falling from the sky. Weather systems move faster than festival security can clear crowds, creating moments where thousands of people become sitting ducks for nature's worst moods. Technology helps, but it's not foolproof. Weather predictions get things wrong, and festival grounds often lack adequate shelter for massive crowds when storms hit unexpectedly. Emergency plans look great on paper until 50,000 people need to evacuate simultaneously through exits designed for normal crowd flow. Climate change has made weather even more unpredictable at outdoor events. Extreme temperatures, sudden storms and unusual weather patterns catch everyone off guard more frequently than ever before. Festival planners now budget for weather-related disasters like they're planning for equipment failures or medical emergencies. The elements will always be the ultimate party crashers, but understanding their deadly potential has saved countless lives at modern festivals. However, even with all our preparation and technology, there's one thing about festival dangers that organizers learned through the hardest experiences possible. Nobody learns faster than someone who just watched disaster unfold. The festival world is no exception. After bodies pile up and lawsuits flood in, organizers suddenly discover safety measures they swear they knew about all along. Take the Love Parade tragedy in Germany. 21 people crushed to death in a tunnel because nobody thought to check if a million ravers could actually fit through one exit. Makes sense, right? After that nightmare, electronic music festivals across Europe started treating crowdflow like rocket science. They hired engineers to map every possible route. They installed pressure sensors to monitor density. Some events even use artificial intelligence to predict dangerous bottlenecks before they form. But here's the thing about learning from disaster. It's expensive. Suddenly festivals need armies of security guards, medical teams and safety coordinators. A single ambulance costs thousands per day. Professional crowd control barriers run about $50 per meter. When you're looking at miles of fencing, those numbers add up fast. The wristband revolution started after too many gate crashes caused chaos. Astroworld had people jumping fences and overwhelming security. Now most major festivals use radio frequency identification wristbands that track exactly how many people enter each section. Sounds fancy, but it's basically the same technology grocery stores use to prevent shoplifting. Medical teams train differently now too. Before disasters like Woodstock '99, festival medics mostly dealt with dehydration and twisted ankles. These days they prepare for mass casualty events. They practice treating gunshot wounds, crush injuries, and drug overdoses simultaneously. Some festivals maintain field hospitals that rival small-town emergency rooms. Weather monitoring became serious business after lightning strikes killed festival goers. Modern events employ meteorologists who track storms in real time. When lightning appears within 8 miles, stages shut down immediately. Rain forecasts trigger emergency shelter protocols. Flash flood warnings can evacuate entire campsites within hours. Then there's the psychology angle nobody talks about. Crowds behave differently when they feel trapped. Festival designers now study human panic responses like they're defusing bombs. Exit signs aren't just functional, they're psychological safety nets. Wide pathways reduce anxiety even when they're not needed. Multiple escape routes calm crowds subconsciously. Drug policy shifted from denial to harm reduction after too many preventable overdoses. Festivals started admitting that people use drugs whether it's legal or not. Some events provide free drug testing to identify dangerous substances. Others train staff to recognize overdose symptoms and administer naloxone. These programs face political backlash, but they save lives. Communication systems got complete overhauls. During emergencies, festival staff need instant contact across huge areas. Radio networks now include backup frequencies and redundant systems. Some festivals use drone networks to monitor crowds from above. Emergency coordinators can watch crowd density shift in real time and redirect traffic before problems develop. Legal liability drove many changes faster than genuine safety concerns. After Astroworld lawsuits reached hundreds of millions, insurance companies started demanding specific safety protocols. No insurance means no festival. Suddenly organizers found religion about crowd control limits and emergency procedures. Risk assessment became an actual job. Professional safety consultants now evaluate everything from stage construction to bathroom placement. They calculate how long it takes to evacuate different sections. They model worst-case scenarios and plan responses. Some festivals run full emergency drills before opening to the public. International coordination emerged after disasters repeated across continents. Safety standards developed for European festivals now influence events in Asia and America. Professional organizations share data about what works and what fails catastrophically. A stampede prevention technique tested in Germany might save lives at a festival in Brazil. Technology keeps advancing faster than regulations can follow. Facial recognition systems track troublemakers across multiple events. Smartphone apps can alert security to fights or medical emergencies instantly. Some festivals experiment with predictive algorithms that identify dangerous situations before they escalate. The human element remains unpredictable though. All the safety equipment in the world can't prevent someone from opening fire from a hotel window. Metal detectors and bag searches help, but determined attackers adapt their methods. Security teams now train for active shooter scenarios, alongside natural disasters and crowd crushes. Smaller festivals face impossible choices. They can't afford the same safety measures as major events, but they face similar risks. Insurance costs alone can bankrupt local celebrations. Many traditional festivals simply stopped happening, rather than meet new safety requirements. Training extends beyond professional staff now. Volunteers learn basic emergency response. Food vendors understand evacuation procedures. Even performers get briefed on crowd safety signals. Everyone becomes part of the safety network, whether they want to or not. The irony cuts deep. These safety measures work. Modern festivals are statistically safer than driving to the grocery store, but they're also more sterile, more controlled, more corporate. Something gets lost when spontaneous celebration becomes risk-managed experience. Despite all these improvements, people still gather by the thousands to share music, food, and community. The fundamental human need to celebrate together proves stronger than fear. But underneath every modern festival runs an invisible network of prevention systems, quietly working to ensure everyone goes home alive. Still, for all our technological advances and safety protocols, certain cultural traditions refuse to bend to modern sensibilities. Festival dangers exist everywhere, but here's what makes them fascinating. The most perilous celebrations often carry the deepest cultural meaning. The Spanish don't run with bulls because they have nothing better to do on a Tuesday morning. The Japanese don't ride massive logs down mountains for Instagram likes. These traditions stretch back centuries, woven into the fabric of who these communities believe themselves to be. Take El Colacho, where men dressed as devils leap over rows of babies. Sounds completely insane, right? Well, parents in Castrillo de Murcia have been doing this since the 1600s. They genuinely believe it protects their children from evil spirits. One missed step could be catastrophic, but that's exactly the point. The risk makes the ritual meaningful. Without danger, it's just a guy in a costume hopping around. The same logic applies to Peru's Takanakui fighting festival. Community members settle year-long grudges with bare-knuckle brawls, then shake hands afterward. Outsiders see violence and broken noses. Locals see conflict resolution and social harmony. The physical pain serves a purpose. It clears the air for another year of peaceful coexistence. Then there's the Greek rocket war on Chios Island. Two rival churches fire thousands of homemade rockets at each other, while Easter services continue inside. The tradition supposedly started during Ottoman rule as a way to disguise rebellion as religious celebration. Burns and accidents happen regularly, but villagers board up their windows and carry on. The rockets aren't just fireworks, they're symbols of resistance and community identity. What's particularly interesting is how locals view these risks compared to outsiders. Visitors often focus on the danger first, and the meaning second. They see the Gloucester cheese rolling race as people tumbling down a deadly hill chasing dairy products. The community sees it as a rite of passage that connects them to generations of neighbors who took the same risks. Global interest actually helps keep these dangerous traditions alive. Tourism brings money, media attention, and a sense of pride. The running of the bulls in Pamplona was a local tradition until Ernest Hemingway wrote about it. Now it's a worldwide phenomenon that attracts thousands of international participants each year. The economic incentive makes communities less likely to abandon risky customs, even when accidents pile up. But something curious happens when younger generations get involved. They often push for modifications that reduce danger without eliminating tradition entirely. Some cheese rolling events now use foam wheels instead of the traditional hard cheese. Certain fire festivals have introduced safety barriers that didn't exist decades ago. It's cultural evolution in real time. The generational divide creates interesting tensions. Older participants sometimes view safety improvements as diluting authentic tradition. Younger ones argue that dead or injured celebrants can't carry traditions forward at all. Makes sense, right? Hard to pass down cultural knowledge when you're in the hospital with a broken spine. Religious festivals present the most complex cultural challenges. When Hindu pilgrims pierce their skin during Thaipusam, they're demonstrating faith through physical sacrifice. Safety regulations feel like interference with divine practice. Similarly, when millions gather for the Kumbh Mela, despite stampede risks, they're prioritizing spiritual duty over personal safety. These aren't casual entertainment choices. They're expressions of fundamental beliefs about life, death, and meaning. Well, modern festival organizers face an impossible balancing act. Too many safety measures, and they destroy the authentic experience that draws people. Too few, and they face lawsuits, government intervention, or complete cancellation. The 2010 Love Parade disaster led to stricter crowd control regulations across Europe, but some argue these changes have sanitized festival culture beyond recognition. Social media adds another layer of complexity. Dangerous festival moments go viral instantly, attracting thrill seekers who care more about content creation than cultural respect. This changes the nature of participation from community ritual to individual spectacle. Local organizers struggle to maintain traditional meaning while managing crowds of outsiders who treat sacred ceremonies like extreme sports. And the weird part is how communities adapt differently to external pressure. Some embrace commercialization and safety improvements as necessary evolution. Others double down on dangerous traditions as acts of cultural preservation against outside interference. The Japanese Onbashira festival continues despite regular injuries because participants view it as essential to their identity as descendants of ancient mountain peoples. Economic factors influence every decision about festival safety. Poor communities often can't afford extensive safety measures even when they want them. Wealthy areas face different pressures, insurance requirements, liability concerns, and government oversight that can fundamentally alter traditional practices. Money doesn't just buy safety, it changes cultural expression itself. The relationship between danger and community bonding remains consistent across cultures. Shared risk creates powerful social connections. People who survive festival dangers together form lasting bonds that strengthen community fabric. Remove the risk entirely, and you might also remove the social benefits that made the tradition valuable in the first place. These cultural tensions reveal something essential about human nature and how we balance tradition with progress. But they also hint at deeper questions about what happens when individual safety conflicts with collective meaning, especially as our world becomes increasingly interconnected and regulated. When the last firework fades and the final drumbeat echoes into silence, something interesting happens. The chaos stops. The screaming crowds disperse. The adrenaline that kept people running from bulls or dodging flying oranges finally subsides. What's left is just quiet darkness and the strange human need to make sense of it all. We've traveled through centuries of festivals that could kill you, from ancient Romans cheering as gladiators bled out in sand arenas to modern concertgoers crushed against metal barriers. The locations changed, the technology evolved, but one thing stayed exactly the same: people kept showing up. Think about that for a second. After every disaster, every stampede, every tragic headline, humans dust themselves off and plan the next celebration. The Spanish didn't stop running with bulls after the first goring. The Japanese didn't abandon their log-riding festival after broken bones piled up. Even after Love Parade's Tunnel of Death, electronic music festivals exploded in popularity worldwide. What drives this stubborn refusal to play it safe? Maybe it's because danger and joy have always been dance partners. The risk isn't a bug in the festival experience, it's a feature. When you're standing in a crowd of thousands knowing that things could go sideways at any moment, every laugh hits different, every shared moment feels more intense. The possibility of disaster makes the celebration feel more alive. Ancient cultures understood this better than we do. Their festivals weren't sanitized entertainment designed by insurance companies. They were raw expressions of what it means to be human. Yes, people died at Roman games and Celtic fire festivals, but they also felt connected to something bigger than their daily grind of survival. Modern festivals try to capture that same lightning in a bottle. We want the thrill without the actual threat. Safety barriers replace genuine danger. Professional stunt performers substitute for real gladiators. Yet somehow real risks keep creeping back in. Stampedes at music festivals, overdoses at raves, shootings at country concerts. It's like danger refuses to be completely tamed. The weirdest part, The communities that host these risky traditions are often the most protective of them. Ask someone from Pamplona about banning the bull run, and they'll look at you like you suggested demolishing their cathedral. Mention making the cheese rolling festival safer, and locals will explain why you're missing the point entirely. They're not being reckless. They understand something we've forgotten in our bubble-wrapped world. Shared risk creates bonds that shared comfort never could. When you've survived something dangerous together, you're not just acquaintances anymore. You're part of a tribe that faced the unknown and lived to tell about it. This explains why festival disasters rarely kill the festivals themselves. The 2010 Love Parade tragedy ended that specific event, but electronic dance music festivals multiplied globally. Astroworld's deadly crowd surge didn't stop hip-hop festivals, it just changed how they're managed. Each tragedy becomes a learning experience, not an ending. But here's where it gets complicated. As festivals become more commercialized, the relationship between risk and reward shifts. Ancient communities accepted festival dangers because they were celebrating their own traditions. Modern festival goers often pay corporations for manufactured experiences. The communal aspect gets diluted. The risks remain, but the spiritual payoff diminishes. Yet people keep searching for authentic moments of collective celebration. They'll travel thousands of miles to throw tomatoes in Spain, or watch rockets explode in Greece. They'll camp in mud, risk sunstroke, and pay ridiculous prices for water, just to be part of something that feels real. The night after any major festival, whether ancient or modern, safe or dangerous, the same scene plays out. Exhausted participants sprawl in whatever shelter they can find, comparing stories. The conversations always follow similar patterns. Who got hurt? Who made new friends? Which moments felt transcendent? Which disasters got narrowly avoided? These post-festival discussions reveal something crucial about human nature. We process risk and joy together because they're fundamentally connected. The festivals that stick in our memories aren't the perfectly safe ones. They're the events where something unexpected happened, where we felt vulnerable and survived, where we glimpsed what our ancestors felt when they gathered around fires and hoped the crops would grow. Sleep comes eventually, but the stories live forever. Every dangerous festival creates legends that outlast the participants. Every tragedy becomes a cautionary tale that somehow makes the next celebration feel more precious. Every survivor carries forward the strange knowledge that being human means choosing to gather, celebrate, and risk it all, even when we know better. Tomorrow will bring new festivals with new dangers, and people will line up anyway. Because beneath all our modern safety measures and risk assessments lies an ancient truth: we'd rather live dangerously together than safely alone. But festivals aren't the only places where humans gather and create unexpected mayhem.